Tonight, as you prepare to close your eyes and let the hum of the day drift away, allow yourself to settle into a rare kind of calm, the gentle anticipation of being carried somewhere unexpected, yet safe. Imagine, for a moment, a journey unlike any other, not across continents, but across centuries. Not a sprint, not a chase, but a slow, wandering walk through the quiet corridors of human history, lit only by the soft glow of curiosity and the hush of stories waiting patiently to be heard. Let your room grow quiet, let your breath grow slow. In the darkness, the world softens. The edges of anxiety, of to-do lists and busy thoughts begin to blur until only a gentle, steady presence remains. That presence is history, not the clattering, exhausting parade of dates and battles and kings, but the secret history that flows under the surface, the kind that waits to be discovered only when the rest of the world is asleep. What if, instead of marching through the chapters of the past, you could float above them, drifting gently, as if cradled on a sea of time? What stories would rise to the surface? What forgotten voices might you hear in the hush? Tonight, let's wander together through the quieter side of history, the side that isn't loud or triumphant, but deeply, achingly human. Our journey begins with a question, one that has lingered in hearts and minds across every era. Why do we worry? Why does anxiety, in all its forms, return again and again, as persistent as the tide? Is it something new, born of modern life and glowing screens? Or is it as old as our first steps into the unknown, as ancient as the stars themselves? Imagine, centuries ago, a woman sits awake under the flickering light of an oil lamp. Her thoughts churn, her heart pounds, but there are no words for her restlessness. Around her, the world is filled with explanations, some comforting, some strange, some unkind. Her anxiety, misunderstood, becomes the start of a story that will echo through time. This is not just a story about fear, though. It is a story about how people have tried to understand what they feel, about doctors and healers, mothers and daughters, philosophers and poets, each searching for meaning in the flutter of the heart and the shadow in the mind. Some called it wandering womb. Others saw it as a demon, a curse, a medical problem, or a sign of spiritual weakness. Sometimes it was simply a secret, hidden behind closed doors. And as we float through history, we find that the marks left by worry are not only hidden in the mind, they are carved and inked into the body. The story of tattoos runs alongside. The story of anxiety, like a winding river beside an ancient road. Long before tattooing became art, rebellion, or fashion, it was a language of healing, protection, and belonging. From the icy mummies of Siberia to the sunlit banks of the Nile, ink on skin became a way to claim identity, to ease pain, to tell stories when words were not enough. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the human longing for understanding is that it always looks upward, outward, toward the unknown. In our own time, that longing has reached beyond the horizon, beyond the clouds, into the cold, dazzling dark of space. There, in the silence between the stars, we have sent our questions about who we are, what makes us anxious, what it means to be alive, farther than any dream before. You might ask yourself in these quiet hours, what links all these stories? What do anxiety, tattoos, and the space race have in common? The answer, whispered in every age, is simple. The need to belong, to feel understood, to know that we are not alone with our worries, our scars, or our wild, impossible hopes. So tonight, as you settle deeper into comfort, let the quiet hum of history be your lullaby. Feel the threads connecting you to countless others, those who lay awake in ancient cities, those who tattooed prayers onto their skin, those who gazed at the moon and wondered if they might touch it one day. Their fears and dreams are stitched into the fabric of time, a tapestry of gentle persistence. Let your thoughts wander as far as you wish, knowing that this story, like all the best stories, will wait for you to return, no matter how many times you drift away. The night is long, and the journey is just beginning. Breathe in, breathe out, and trust that you are in good company. For in the world of boring history, every quiet moment is an invitation to dream, and every dream is another step along. The endless path of being human. The night is warm along the Aegean coast, and a round moon hangs above whitewashed walls. Cicadas sing in the distance while an olive lamp flickers beside an open doorway. Step through that doorway with me for a while. Inside, the room is small and surprisingly quiet. A woman sits near the glow, fingertips pressed to her chest as if steadying an invisible flutter. Her name might be Eutychia, though the records of common women were rarely written. She feels tightness in her ribs, a racing pulse at her throat, and waves of breath that will not settle. She cannot find words for this sensation. In her language, there is no single term that gathers every corner of fear and restlessness, yet the feeling is real as the stones beneath her feet or the stars above her roof. Outside, Athens lives and breathes. Philosophers in the agora debate virtue and justice. Poets recite lines beside cool fountains. Children chase stray cats through dusty streets while merchants haggle over jars of honey and crimson dye. Eutychia does not join them tonight. She worries that if she leaves her chair, the uneasy flutter in her body will grow louder than the city itself. Tomorrow she will visit the local healer, a man who has studied the teachings of Hippocrates with passionate diligence. He has opinions about many things, especially the bodies of women. By the 4th century before the Common Era, the wandering womb theory is taken almost as fact. Learned men believe that a woman's uterus is not fixed in place but alive, a creature with desires, capable of roaming through the corridors of flesh in search of warm, moist comfort. If a womb remains empty too long, it grows bored. It may slither upward toward the chest, pressing upon the heart, squeezing the lungs, causing breathlessness, fainting, trembling, and that unspoken feeling of dread. Some physicians write that the womb might travel even farther, coiling like a snake around a woman's throat until she gasps for air. The diagnosis for Eutychia, therefore, is already decided before she speaks a single sentence. Imagine her visit. Morning sun pours over marble steps as she walks into the courtyard of the healer. He listens with the solemn air required of a student of medicine. He strokes his beard, nods at the correct moments, and finally proclaims that her womb has lost its way. His treatment is equal parts ritual and speculation. Pleasant fragrances, sweet myrtle, rose petals, a crumble of cinnamon, will be waved near her hips to entice the womb downward. Foul odours, burnt wool, rancid fish, acrid garlic will be held beneath her nostrils to drive the wayward organ away from her chest. While assistants prepare bundles of herbs, he suggests marriage if she is unmarried, pregnancy if she is married, and a reduction of reading or thought if she has shown too much curiosity. The womb must be kept occupied, he explains, otherwise it will wander again. Eutychia nods because disagreement is rarely welcomed, and because she too is searching for any remedy that promises peace. That evening, she returns home. A brazier is lit. Aromatic smoke curls above the clay floor. She inhales, hoping the scent will lull the flutter inside her. For a moment, it does. The air feels softer, the room steadier. Yet when the smoke fades, the flutter remains, subtle but certain, like distant thunder beneath clear skies. She thinks of the healer's other advice. Find a husband quickly, bear children, occupy the womb. She is not opposed to family. She simply wonders why no one asks about her thoughts, her memories, the sudden mourning that sometimes sweeps over her for reasons she cannot name. Across the city, scholars gather beneath a colonnade. They discuss the nature of the soul, the balance of humours, the importance of moderation. They consider themselves men of logic, yet they accept without question the idea of a restless womb, with a mind of its own. In their writings, anxiety is still an external mischief, never a quiet storm within the heart. a woman is expected to endure. If she faints, attendants will loosen her robes, hold vinegar beneath her nose, and recite prayers to Artemis for safe return. If she trembles, the healer will prescribe warm wine infused with mint, then remind her that too much emotion can invite disease. What no one sees is the small bravery of Eutychia's nightly routine. She sits by her lamp and breathes as slowly as she can. Inhale while counting to 4, exhale while counting to 6. She learned this rhythm from her mother, who learned it from hers, a lineage of fragile secrets passed from woman to woman, because official texts offer little comfort. On calmer nights, Eutychia whispers quiet questions to the empty air. Why does my heart gallop when no beast pursues me? Why do my thoughts spin even when the world is still? Is the fault truly in my womb, or is it somewhere no physician has looked? Sometimes she remembers stories told by travelling bards, tales of Hera's pride, of Athena's wisdom, of mortal heroines who spoke truth and were turned into trees or fountains for their boldness. Even goddesses are punished for being too passionate. Perhaps that is why the healer fears her restlessness. Passion unsettles order, and order is precious to those in power. Better to blame a wandering organ than confront the possibility that a woman's inner life is as complex and worthy of respect as any philosopher's argument. Beyond her small home, seasons change. Grapes ripen on sun-drenched hills, olives are pressed into golden oil, and city festivals honor Athena with processions of chanting youths. Eutychia joins when she can. There are evenings when the flutter subsides and laughter feels easy. She dances in a circle with other women, sandals scuffing dusty ground, tunics swirling like pale moths beneath torchlight. In these moments, she is not broken, merely alive, full of the same shifting energies that move the tides and guide the phases of the moon. Yet the healer's warnings linger. If anxiety returns, she fears neighbors will whisper that her womb has wandered again. When sleeplessness steals an entire night, she wonders if marriage would silence the flutter, or if it would simply teach her to hide it better. Each solution, offered by her society, is a door that leads back to silence. The beauty of history is that we can listen now in ways those around her could not. From our vantage, the theory of a roaming uterus seems almost tender in its naivete, a desperate attempt to explain what no tools could measure. The ancient Greeks saw patterns everywhere, in stars, in seas, in bodies, and when a pattern escaped understanding, they imagined movement, literal and wild. Today we know anxiety travels along nerves, chemicals, unseen pathways of thought, not through the corridors of bone and muscle. Yet the human impulse remains identical: to find meaning, to soothe what trembles, to feel safe inside the mystery of being alive. As you lie in your own time and place, hearing the echo of Eutychia's lamp and the cicadas outside her window, consider what comforts span the centuries: a steady breath, a story shared. The knowledge that fear, though it changes names and costumes, has visited every generation. You are not the first to feel an invisible flutter at midnight, and you will not be the last. The healer's herbs may have faded, but the hope for calm endures. Let that hope settle over you now like a linen veil, cool and soft. In the hush between one heartbeat and the next, imagine the wandering womb finding rest, not because of fragrant smoke or quick marriage, but because someone finally listens. Tonight that listener is you, honoring her story with your quiet attention. The flutter slows, the lamp burns low. Outside, the moon continues its ancient watch, and within, the pulse of history drifts towards sleep. The olive lamp in Eutychia's small Athenian room has barely gone cold when our journey carries us westward across the shimmering sea. Here the air tastes of salt and stone, sharpened by the clang of hammers in busy forges and softened by the distant murmur of fountains. Rome has risen, and with it a new confidence, a grand belief that every question can be mastered by law, engineering, or sheer civic pride. Marble arches stride across valleys, Aqueducts pour water into crowded baths, and the bustle of the forum never truly sleeps. Yet inside these orderly walls, the same restless music continues to play in the human chest. Anxiety has not been conquered, it has merely changed its name. Imagine a Roman morning just before dawn. Vendors are laying out baskets of figs and garlands of laurel. Legionaries march in step toward the city gates, while senators rehearse speeches that will sway the day's debates. At the edge of a quiet courtyard, a woman named Flavia draws her cloak tighter and waits for the physician who has been summoned by her anxious household. She has not slept for many nights. Each evening brings a rising tide of dread that she cannot explain. Her husband is sympathetic in the manner expected of a respectable Roman citizen. He wishes her distress were simpler, something he could settle, with coin or sacrifice. But what disturbs Flavia is intangible. No fever warms her brow, no wound marks her skin. Only her heart refuses to obey the calm order of Roman life. When the healer arrives, he enters with practiced gravity. He carries scrolls of Galen and Serranus in mind and speaks in confident tones about balance and duty. In recent years, Roman medicine has adopted the Greek idea of the wandering womb, yet it has given the phenomenon a sterner Latin phrase that sounds almost martial: fura uterinus. This furious womb, they say, can rebel if neglected, if its natural purpose remains unfulfilled. Marriage is a shield against unrest. Childbirth is the best cure. If symptoms persist, the physician prescribes a strict regimen. Flavia must avoid strong emotions, a phrase that covers everything from grief to laughter too loud. She should walk in shaded gardens and bathe in warm water scented with rose. She must drink wine diluted with honey, but never unmixed. Most important of all, she should conceive again as soon as possible. New life will anchor the restless organ, calming the storm that disturbs her spirit. Flavia nods, though her thoughts are not at peace. She has already borne 2 children. Both survive and thrive. Her body remembers the weight of pregnancy and the aches of delivery, yet her heart, instead of settling into contentment, sometimes races without warning. Moments of calm vanish like startled doves. She wonders whether a 3rd child would quiet or amplify the strange voice inside her. That evening, household slaves prepare steaming baths and platters of bread, cheese, and olives. The physician's instructions are faithfully followed. For a time, the warm water soothes Flavia's limbs. She closes her eyes and imagines floating upon the gentle Tiber. Yet when night returns and torches gutter low, the hush becomes too loud. The dread creeps in again, pouring at the edges of her mind. She remembers the physician's final words, spoken almost as an afterthought. Some wives find relief when they keep their eyes fixed upon small domestic joys, embroidery perhaps, or arranging flowers, or listening in silence to the steady stories of older matrons, anything to keep the mind from wandering where it should not. In the morning, Flavia sits beside her neighbour Valeria, who embroiders a pattern of vines and sparrows. The rhythm of needle and thread is steady, almost hypnotic. Valeria hums under, her breath, and speaks about the weather, the price of saffron, the gossip swirling around an upcoming trial in the basilica. Flavia tries to join the gentle current of conversation, but her thoughts continue to leap ahead. The physician called her condition feminine weakness. Valeria calls it nerves. Flavia wonders if it is simply fear of something she cannot name. Rome is a city of unspoken dangers, childbirth complications, sudden illness, political rumors that turn deadly, the random bolt of Jupiter's anger. Anxiety might be the natural cost of living in a world where fortune can rise and fall in the blink of an eye. Beyond the courtyards and atriums, Rome hums like a vast machine. Senators debate grain prices. Generals plan new campaigns. Architects measure distances for future aqueducts. None of their ledgers list the sleepless hours of women. The empire values order and success, both visible and tangible. Restless thoughts. Leave no monument so they remain invisible. Private burdens carried behind closed doors. There are moments when Flavia's dread subsides almost completely. During festivals, the city erupts in colour and sound. Trumpets blare, dancers perform under strings of lanterns, and even the stern faces of magistrates soften. Flavia finds herself laughing along with her children as acrobats tumble through crowded streets. Whether by distraction or by joy, her heart steadies. Yet celebrations end, lanterns sputter out, and the city returns to its measured beat. At the next dawn, the physician's advice still waits on the household tablet, like a binding contract. Months pass. Flavia conceives again and gives birth to a daughter beneath the watchful statues of household gods. The midwife pronounces mother and child healthy. Friends bring silk swaddling cloths and warm bread sweetened with dates. The physician returns to observe and declares the furious womb subdued at last. For a while, Flavia believes him. She is busy with the needs of a newborn, the endless cycle of feeding and soothing. Exhaustion leaves little room for nameless dread. But one spring night, after the baby has fallen asleep, Flavia sits alone in the peristyle garden. Moonlight pools on marble tiles. Orange blossoms scent the air with delicate sweetness. Without warning, the familiar flutter begins again. It rolls through her chest like distant thunder. She presses a palm to her ribs and follows her own slow breath the way Eutychia did centuries earlier across the sea. She counts heartbeats, matches inhales to exhales, and waits for calm. It comes slowly, like sunrise behind heavy clouds. When the tremor fades, she feels both relief and quiet frustration. The physician's cure was incomplete. The womb has fulfilled its duty, yet the restlessness remains. If she could step outside her time, Flavia might learn that anxiety lives in the mind's hidden pathways, in currents of chemistry and memory. She might learn words like adrenaline, cortisol, neural feedback. In her present, she knows only that fear can follow love, that joy can stand shoulder to shoulder with dread, and that no physician she has met can capture that paradox on a wax tablet. Still she persists. She teaches her sons their letters, shows her daughter the constellations visible through the open roof of the atrium, and tells stories of Aeneas and Lavinia when the household gathers around the brazier on cold evenings. She keeps a private practice too, learned through trial and error. Lavender crushed between fingers and inhaled deeply, a cup of water poured from the same clay jug each dawn, a whispered prayer to Venus for serenity rather than passion. Rituals become anchors. They do not cure, but they steady. History records the battles of emperors and the orations of statesmen. It rarely records Flavia's small courage. Yet her story survives in the quiet lineage of every person who has sat awake at night and placed a hand on a racing heart. The theory of furor uterinus will one day be shelved with other obsolete ideas. Medical scrolls will crumble, and marble statues will lose their noses to time. What remains is the simple truth that fear and hope share the same human vessel. To live is to feel the stir of both. Let this truth rest with you now. Close your eyes and hear the fountain murmuring in Flavia's garden. Feel the cool marble beneath bare feet, the weight of jasmine on warm air. The city beyond may be vast and loud, but inside this moment there is only breath, steady and soft. Anxiety passes, calm returns. The heart remembers its gentler rhythm and carries it into sleep. Night settles over Europe like a thick wool cloak. The last embers in cottage hearths crackle, monasteries toll their final bells, and beyond city walls, wolves test the darkness with tentative howls. It is the 11th century, an age of kings and plagues, cathedrals and crusades, when the mind's shadows are explained not by wandering organs or unstable humours, but by spirits, angels, and lurking demons. Imagine a village no wider than a stone's throw, its thatched roofs huddled close as though seeking warmth from one another. Smoke rises through holes in straw, carrying the scent of peat and cabbage into a sky so star-bright, you can almost believe heaven is leaning down too. Listen. In the centre stands a small church built of rough-hewn timbers. Its single bell, black with soot, has rung for weddings, burials, and the summoning of aid during fires that consume whole grain stores in a single furious night. The villagers fear droughts and taxes, bandits and fevers. Yet an older fear beats, beneath them all, the fear of being singled out by the unseen. At the edge of this settlement lives Alice, a weaver's daughter. By day, she turns sheep's wool into soft blue thread, her hands nimble and sure. By night, she lies awake beside the dying coals, pulse skittering like a sparrow under a thatch eave. Her breath shortens, her vision narrows. She cannot name what hunts her inside the dark, only that it comes in waves. Tightness in the chest, trembling in the limbs, a certainty that something terrible waits just beyond the shuttered window. In another world, Alice might whisper of sleeplessness, heart palpitations, intrusive thoughts. Here, she faces different explanations. When she confides in her mother, the older woman crosses herself, then sprinkles salt across the threshold to keep devils from entering. She speaks of St. Vitus, patron of epileptics and nervous sufferers, and vows to light a beeswax candle in his honor. But candles are dear and winter stores already thin. Prayer must suffice. Alice nods, grateful for comfort, yet unsettled, that her nights now hang on the favor of an invisible saint. Sunday dawn arrives with a golden hush. Inside the church, torches hiss and gutter, scattering amber light over a painting of St. Michael, spearing a horned beast. The priest speaks Latin, verses no one fully understands, then translates loosely into the village tongue. Fear is a testing, ground for faith. Crush the serpent beneath thy heel. Alice lowers her gaze. She cannot help scanning the faces around her, neighbors she has known since childhood, wondering if they too feel this nightly terror. Everyone looks solemn, but solemnity is required at Mass. Behind folded hands and bowed heads, other hearts may be racing. She cannot tell, and the secrecy of suffering makes her own pulse hammer harder. Word of her struggles reaches the local abbess, a woman called Sister Meliora, who has tended many souls burdened by melancholy. The abbey infirmary stands just beyond. Monastery walls, its stone-cold corridors echoing with whispered psalms. Sister Meliora invites Alice to stay for a fortnight of prayer, quiet labor, and medicinal tisanes. The offer feels both mercy and dread. Mercy in the promise of rest. Dread in leaving home for stone walls rumored to host exorcisms and mortifications of the flesh. Alice accepts, arriving with a modest bundle. Woolen shift, carved comb, a scrap of embroidered cloth she clutches in moments of panic. Inside the infirmary, she breathes scents of lavender sachets, rosemary smoke, and something coppery that might be dried blood. Sister Meliora greets her with a weathered smile. Fear is an old traveller, she says. We will keep vigil together until it moves on. The regimen is strict. At dawn, Alice joins nuns in chanting the hours, each psalm an anchor dropped into turbulent waters. Mid-morning, she tends the herb garden, trimming rue and valerian that will be steeped into bitter teas. Silence is mandated from matins to compline, except during confession, and the hush leaves ample room for thoughts to swell. Sometimes they press so hard against her ribs, she feels she might split open. At those times, Sister Meliora guides her to the scriptorium, places a feather quill in her hand, and invites her to copy verses from the Book of Hours. The steady scratch of ink across vellum slows her breathing, though the words, "Libera me de timoribus omnibus," remind her constantly of the fear she longs to escape. On her 5th night within the cloister, the panic strikes like sudden frost. She wakes, gasping, convinced she hears clawed feet pacing the yaw. Flagstones. Moonlight slices through a slit window, illuminating dust motes that swirl in frantic constellations. Alice's pulse stutters so violently, she believes her heart might tear. She presses her palms together and whispers the Pater Noster until the words tangle. Remembering an apothecary's counsel, she forces herself to breathe slowly. In 4, counts, hold, out 6. It takes time. Eventually the claws recede. Silence returns, vast and clean. At dawn, Sister Meliora inspects her pallor, prescribes valerian wine, and suggests Alis join her in the chapel's side nave to witness an exorcism. A travelling friar claims a young ploughman is possessed. He mutters nonsense, flings himself to the ground, and refuses food. Alis sits in the back pew, hands cold as rainwater. The friar's booming Latin fills the chapel. He sprinkles holy water that clings to torches in glittering arcs. The ploughman's eyes roll. He cries out in agony, or is it terror, before collapsing in exhausted sobs. The congregation whispers that a demon has flown. Alis feels an ache behind her ribs. Not awe, but recognition. The young man's convulsions look terribly like panic. That evening she finds courage to ask the abbess, "Does fear wear horns, or does it sometimes borrow a human face?" Sister Meliora rests a warm palm on Alis's wrist. "Child, some spirits are of flesh and blood and sorrow. We battle them with gentleness, not fire." For the first time, someone acknowledges her distress without naming demons or prescribing marriage. Tears she has held for years spill silently. They are not exorcised, but welcomed, like rain on thirsty ground. In the following days, Alis is taught simple remedies. Chew angelica root to calm the gut. Inhale steam of chamomile and mint. Murmur the Jesus prayer in rhythm with the heartbeat. She is encouraged to walk the cloister garden at dusk, counting each step against her breath, noticing scent of crushed thyme, the brush of ivy along ancient stones. The abbess explains that fear hates observation. When met with deliberate attention, it often shrinks. By month's end, the panic still visits, yet its edges have softened. Some nights, Alis lies awake, but no longer imagines clawed footsteps. Instead, she rehearses her breathing until dawn glimmers like a silver thread at the window. She returns to her village, weaving shed, carrying a vial of lavender oil and a parchment, on which Sister Meliora has written, "Remember, fear is a guest, not a master. Offer it a seat by the fire, listen a moment, then bid it travel on." Winter passes. Word spreads of a sickness to the east, rumours of boils and blackened tongues. But for now, the village is spared. Alis weaves by day, prays by night. And when the old dread brushes her shoulder, she answers with slow breath and lavender rubbed between forefinger and thumb. Some neighbours say her calm is due to saintly intervention, others that the demon lost interest. Alis no longer corrects them. She knows what truly changed. Someone heard her without fear, named her suffering gently, and taught her that attention, not exorcism, is sometimes the better cure. Centuries later, physicians will speak of hyperventilation and cognitive reframing, of serotonin and limbic loops. They will marvel at how medieval cures mix spiritual comfort with crude superstition. Yet they may also note that Sister Meliora's advice, breathe, walk, observe, accept, echoes through modern therapy rooms. Wisdom sometimes hides in unexpected robes. Tonight, as your own room darkens and the hush deepens, imagine the cloister garden bathed in moonlight. Smell thyme crushed beneath simple sandals. Feel cool stone under palm. When your thoughts stir restless wings, remember Alis counting, steps beneath a winter sky. Fear may knock, but you may greet it calmly, offering it a single seat, no more. The choir of the old abbey hums a soft drone somewhere in time, and you, like all who came before, breathe in, breathe out, letting the heart slow, letting night wrap softly around your shoulders. A pale sunrise spills through the lattice of a Tuscan villa, turning dust motes to gold as if the very air were stitched with promise. Outside, larks trill above vineyards soaked in dew. Inside, a servant draws, back curtains of heavy damask, unveiling a world newly reborn. Marble workshops echo with chisel and mallet. Frescoes bloom on church walls, and scholars pore over rediscovered scrolls, convinced that reason and beauty will conquer every corner of ignorance. This is the Renaissance, an age that loves harmony and despises imbalance. Yet beneath its polished veneer, Anxiety still curls like smoke in a hidden hearth. Meet Caterina de Rossi, eldest daughter of a prosperous Florentine merchant. Her gowns are sewn from velvet, the colour of new plums. Her slippers perfumed with crushed violets. Her education, though modest by humanist standards, ample enough to quote a line of Virgil when conversation turns dull. Yet each night, when the household retires and torches in the courtyard gutter low, Caterina lies awake, heart thudding against her stays. Breath catches in silk-tight ribs. Shadows on the ceiling sharpen into omens. She does not scream. Ladies of breeding must never shriek. But the hollow between her collarbones shivers as if some small bird were trapped beneath her skin. At dawn she summons the family physician, Messer Giulio, broad-shouldered, brow beaded, with camphor oil. He has studied Galen's humours and Hippocrates' wandering womb, has paged through freshly printed Latin editions of Avicenna, and speaks with the new confidence of a man who believes antiquity can cure any ill. Sitting beside Caterina, he pinches her wrist, counts her pulse, frowns at its speed. An excess of blood, he decides, heating the heart, disturbing your noble temperament. A diagnosis of imbalance, but not quite hysteria. Progress, of a sort, though the remedy remains painfully familiar. First comes bloodletting. In a sunlit loggia scented with lemon trees, a bleeder's razor kisses Caterina's ivory forearm. Crimson rivulets drip into a porcelain bowl painted with cherubs. The cut stings, yet she barely flinches. Elegance demands composure. When dizziness follows, servants hurry with sugared almonds and watered wine. Giulio nods in satisfaction. The surplus heat escapes, he says, and your mind will cool. Next, leeches, ruby-striped creatures drunk on her lifeblood, clinging behind her knees like obscene jewelry. They are said to draw bad humours straight from the veins. Caterina studies them with equal parts disgust and fascination. Do they truly swallow fear? She doubts it, but keeps silent. Doubt is unfashionable in a household that hosts philosophers who declaim about celestial spheres between courses of stuffed quail. Days pass. Pale bruises bloom where the leeches fed. Caterina's pulse slows, but the midnight tremble returns, subtle as a tremor beneath mosaic tiles. Messer Giulio prescribes cupping. Hot glass bulbs pressed to her back until skin rises in purple welts. Afterward, she is wrapped in linen and confined to a dim chamber scented with rosemary and orange. Peel. Rest, he instructs, but do not read. Too many books excite the delicate faculties. She obeys outwardly while chafing inside. The new humanist ideas flutter at the borders of her mind like caged finches denied flight. When remedies fail, society offers an older cure. Retreat to the countryside. Caterina is sent to her uncle's villa overlooking rolling hills of silver-green olive trees. There, cicadas drone in cypress boughs, and shepherds' flutes carry on heat-thick air. The villa's physician, Maestro Lorenzo, is gentler. He recommends walks at dawn, fresh figs, cool baths infused with violet petals, and, most radical of all, conversation. One evening he asks, "Tell me, Madonna, what troubles your spirit when the world around you is so fertile with beauty?" The question startles her more than leeches ever could. No doctor has asked for her feelings. They have only sought her symptoms. She speaks hesitantly of tight breath and racing thoughts, of dread without cause, of loneliness disguised by satin sleeves. Lorenzo listens, candlelight dancing in his spectacles. He confides that many gentlewomen confess similar unrest. The mind, he muses, is a garden. If pruned too severely, even roses grow thorns that pierce the hand that tends them. He cannot rewrite medical doctrine, but he offers small heresies, permission to write letters, to paint watercolours, to study Petrarch's sonnets beneath. A myrtle arbour, all pursuits meant to ventilate the soul. For a season, Caterina improves. She fills pages with careful script, describing dawn fog melting over vineyards, owl feathers found in moss, the taste of pomegranate seeds bursting like rubies between her teeth. Anxiety still visits, but when it comes, she meets it under open sky, breathing in time-swept breezes rather than incense-thick chambers. Some nights she sketches the moon, tracing craters she cannot see but imagines, mapping private cartographies of wonder and worry. Meanwhile, in Florence and Rome, artists celebrate human anatomy in marble and fresco, yet seldom depict the restless hearts. Michelangelo sculpts David poised in serene defiance, but not the moment after battlements fall silent and the hero lies awake, pondering fate. Botticelli paints Venus rising from the sea foam, untroubled by pounding temples or churning guts. The Renaissance idealizes poise. Tremor exists only in brushstrokes hidden beneath final varnish. Back in the villa, autumn edges in. Caterina is summoned home for a winter wedding, her own, arranged to consolidate wool trade alliances. The groom, Signor Bernardo, is courteous, eyes like polished walnut, but conversation between them flickers and dies like a taper in wind. On her wedding eve, Caterina's pulse races anew. She presses lavender sachets to her face, remembering Lorenzo's counsel. Breathe slow, name the fear. Let it stand beside you instead of riding on your shoulders. In the hush, she remembers Eutychia and Flavia, sisters across centuries, women who also sought calm beneath alien theories. She whispers a vow not to surrender her small rituals, dawn walks, ink on paper, questions asked even if answers lag centuries behind. The marriage proceeds. Guests toast with spiced wine, mandolins pluck joyous chords, and a poet recites verses praising feminine constancy. Yet anxiety does not vanish with the final note. Some nights it creeps beneath brocade blankets, heartbeat echoing like horse, hooves on distant cobblestones. But now Caterina meets it with an inward nod. She recalls that fear, despite physicians' declarations, is not a malfunctioning womb nor excessive bile alone. It is a message in need of translation, a tender herald of unmet needs, unsung songs, untasted freedoms. As decades turn, medical treatises shift incrementally. Scholars begin to question absolute humoral dominance to peer through primitive lenses at capillaries and nerves. The wandering womb will, in time, lose its place in anatomy. Yet Caterina's lineage of nighttime breathing, mindful walking, and page-filling honesty persists. Stories of women who dared name their feelings pass quietly from midwife to daughter to granddaughter, a soft undercurrent beneath the roar of progress. Now, as you settle beneath your own century's blankets, imagine a Renaissance courtyard, flooded with moonlight, cypress shadows pooling like ink. Picture Caterina pacing slow circuits, inhaling rosemary dusk, exhaling tension into cool night air. Let her steady breath guide your own. With each inhale, draw in the sweet scent of possibility. With each exhale, loosen the stays that still cinch your spirit. History's remedies may fade, but its gentle lessons endure. That listening heals more than leeches. That creativity can cradle anxious hearts. And that beauty, felt, not merely seen, opens windows in the mind where fresh breezes may enter. Allow that breeze to drift through you now, rustling the pages of your day, leaving only softness in its wake. The villa's lamps dim. Paintbrushes rest in jars of cloudy rinse water. Somewhere beyond the hills, a single nightingale begins to sing. For Caterina, for you, for every soul that has ever sought ease beneath a restless sky. A pale shaft of morning light slips across a parquet floor, illuminating rows of leather-bound volumes and the delicate gears of a gleaming brass orrery. Outside, carriage wheels clatter over cobblestones. Inside, quills scratch equations in fresh-pressed ink. It is the late 17th century, and Europe hums with a new conviction that every mystery of motion, of magnetism, of the human body itself can be measured, catalogued, and ultimately mastered. The air glows with possibility, as fragrant and potent as the coffee now poured in fashionable cafes, where philosophers argue beneath oil-smoked chandeliers. Reason, they insist, shall conquer superstition. Yet reason does not quiet every corner of the soul. Beneath powdered wigs and flaring candle sconces, women still feel hearts race without warning, palms slick with an unspoken dread. The vocabulary has changed. Hysteria is giving way to nervous complaint, but the hush surrounding female anxiety remains. To talk too freely about trembling limbs or midnight terrors would mar the poised silhouette expected of a femme bien élevée, and so many learn once more to suffer in silence. Imagine a Parisian townhouse, its drawing room perfumed by hyacinth and beeswax. Chalk-white walls echo with laughter as a coterie of philosophes debate Voltaire's latest epigram. In one corner sits Elizabeth du Clairon, daughter of a minor nobleman, fan fluttering against a throat encased in pale blue silk. Her smile is steady, her wit as quick as any man's, yet beneath the lace cuffs, her fingers tremble. Delicately, relentlessly. She has learned to hide the quiver by resting her wrist on the arm of a brocade chair. She fears that if anyone notices, the evening's bright discourse might pivot from politics to prescriptions. In these enlightened circles, the old doctrine of a wandering womb has lost fashion, replaced by theories of overstimulated nerves. Learned men speak of fibers stretched taut like violin strings. Too much reading, too much conversation, even too vivid an imagination can pluck them into discord. The diagnosis carries a double edge, more scientific than superstition, yet still an argument that education itself endangers the feminine mind. If Elizabeth confides her worries to a physician, he will neither bleed her nor brand her a witch. Instead, he prescribes rational remedies, moderate exercise, tepid baths infused with chamomile, and most alluring of all, laudanum. This syrup, brandy darkened by opium and kissed with saffron, has become a fashionable panacea. Advertisements promise relief for coughs, cramps, and the vapors. A few drops on the tongue lull nerves into velvet softness. A teaspoon can cloud an entire evening into forgetful hush. Apothecaries sell small Delft vials carved with serpents and suns, reassuring customers that anything so lovely must be safe. Elizabeth takes her first draught one star-washed midnight when thoughts rattle like dice inside her head. The taste is bittersweet, blooming warmth in throat, chest, limbs. Her heart slackens its frantic gallop. Her mind loosens its clenched fists. At breakfast, she appears refreshed, a living testament to modern medicine. Yet dependency grows as silently as ivy. Soon the vial rests beside her quill whenever she writes letters, its amber glow reflecting inside ink pots like trapped fire. Across the Channel, London coffee houses burst with debate. Isaac Newton has proven gravity's rule over planets. John Locke argues the mind is a blank slate shaped by experience. To Enlightenment thinkers, the universe is a giant mechanism, each gear meshing with divine precision. But if the cosmos obeys clockwork law, what of the restless heart? Enter physician George Cheney, whose The English Malady becomes a bestseller in 1733. Cheney sympathizes with nervous distempers flourishing among the refined, especially women of intellect whose minds outrun their constitutions. He advocates diet, fresh air, and cheerful company, yet cannot resist urging moderation of study and violent passions. Cheney praises retreat to the countryside, where pastoral silence might reset jittery fibers. For many ladies, this advice translates into enforced leisure. Needlepoint on sunlit terraces, gentle promenades along clipped hedges, conversation hemmed by polite restraint. Sarah Blackwell, the daughter of a wealthy brewer, obeys her doctors, orders and departs London for Surrey's green hills. Mornings bring dew-damp walks among yew trees and the distant bleat of sheep. For a fortnight her pulse slows. She sketches waterfalls and presses time between pages of her journal. But tranquility frays at dusk. Isolation breeds new worries. About absent family. About an uncharted future. About simply not belonging. She realizes anxiety can bloom as vigorously among night-singing crickets as it does amid carriage rattle and city fog. Not all Enlightenment figures dismiss interior storms. In Vienna, physician-composer Ernest Mesmer believes invisible fluids surge through bodies like cosmic tides. His seances of animal magnetism promise to realign them. Critics scoff, yet his sessions provide a rare space where women describe sensations without fear. Even fraud can offer a form of listening when no other ears are open. More quietly, in Edinburgh, philosopher David Hume records in a letter, "When melancholy storms approach, I observe them as if I am both patient and physician." His self-study hints at future introspection-based therapies. He invites acquaintances, including educated women, to reflect on their feelings rather than drown them in ether or prayer. Though small and localized, these seeds of observation will sprout centuries later into cognitive practices that teach anxious minds to watch thoughts drift like clouds. In an attic chamber near Amsterdam's canals, Anna van Leeuwen keeps her own rebellion. Officially, she manages household accounts for a spice-trading husband often at sea. Unofficially, she devours treatises by Spinoza and Maria Sibylla Merian, scribbling marginalia about soul-body unity and metamorphoses of insects. When breath grows shallow, she turns not to laudanum, but to a brass microscope smuggled from Leipzig. Peering at butterfly scales, she whispers, "Order does not banish wonder, it makes room for it." Observing life in miniature steadies her, chest more surely than poppy tincture. She cannot publish. Women's works still meet printers' scorn. But she copies her observations into secret notebooks tied with silk cord. They will surface generations later, offering small flashes of insight about ritual and self-soothing ahead of their time. Stand now in an ornate library at midnight, walnut shelves climbing toward frescoed ceilings where cherubs present scrolls to Athena. A single taper burns beside a globe whose oceans shimmer with newly charted coasts. Somewhere between shelves labelled Physica and Metaphysica, Elise de Tourmente paces in slippers, counting heartbeats against the echo of her steps. She has read of comets and calculus, yet cannot calculate the sudden surge of dread that climbs her throat. She presses a hand to her sternum, feeling rhythms run, wild like unbridled horses across a moon-silver field. Remembering Cheney's counsel, she opens a casement. Cold air spirals in, scented by distant chestnut trees. On the horizon, lanterns of a watchman bob along the quay. Elise inhales slowly, thinking of Anna's butterflies, of Newton's apple, of nerves as strings that may be plucked, yet also tuned. She begins to hum, a lullaby her nurse once sang in low Breton syllables. The melody threads through blank parchment of night, weaving a fragile calm. Mind and body remain mysteries, but in this moment, they sway toward harmony. Proof that enlightenment is not only in telescopes and treaties, it is also in the small, deliberate acts by which a frightened heart answers itself with kindness. The enlightenment will pass its torch to future centuries, leaving behind both legacy and lesson. Laudanum will linger, blessing and curse alike. The term nervous lady will fade, but its echo remains in every careless suggestion that anxiety is a fashion, not a fact. Yet the age also feeds quieter revolutions. The belief that observation can heal, that environment shapes mind, that conversation matters as much as medication. Each idea inches us closer to understanding the pulse that beats behind trembling hands. As your own night deepens, hear the scratch of quill and flutter of fan subside. Feel the cool library breeze brush your cheek. Let the rational stars wheel overhead in silent equations, while the softer constellations of feeling glow inside your chest. You are heir to both musket and microscope, to laudanum vials and notebooks, filled with moonlit doubts. Breathe with Elizabeth, with Sarah, with Anna and Elise, each seeking calm in an age that prized reason, yet often overlooked the most reasonable cure of all, compassion. Draw that compassion around you like a velvet cloak. The world outside may still chase certainty, but here, in this hush, you are permitted to rest in unanswered questions. The clockwork universe keeps perfect time. Your heart, in its gentler rhythm, need only keep its own. Fog drifts along London's embankment, softening gas lamps into trembling halos. Carriage wheels clatter past lamplit shop fronts where wax mannequins in crinolines stand motionless, eternal paragons of composure. Behind the soot-dark bricks of townhouses, however, real women pace carpeted floors with pulses far less steady. The 19th century exalts self-control. One must stand erect, speak softly, and never betray the inner weatherglass. Yet, beneath corsets cinched tighter than ever, a storm of worry gathers, unacknowledged and dangerously quiet. Industrial power looms thunder, railways shriek, telegraph wires race messages across continents. Progress outpaces breath. Physicians now catalogue a new epidemic among refined females: exhaustion, palpitations, dizziness, tearfulness, aversion to company, an umbrella diagnosis called neurasthenia. To Victorian science, the culprit is not a roaming womb, but a tired nervous system depleted by the very innovations men celebrate. The proposed remedy is simultaneously simple and suffocating. Stop all exertion, physical, intellectual, emotional, until stillness itself becomes medicine. Across the Atlantic, Philadelphia neurologist Silas Weir Mitchell perfects what he proudly calls the rest cure. His prescription spreads quickly to Britain's drawing rooms. A typical plan: absolute bed rest for 6 to 8 weeks. No reading, no writing, no visitors save the nurse. Eyes fixed on the ceiling while the mind empties of thought. Rich cream, beef tea, and milk are spooned hourly to fatten and pacify the nerves. Mitchell boasts 100 cures, yet his journals note few follow-up studies once patients depart. Margaret Avery, pianist and mother of 2, becomes one such study in absence. At 29, her concerts were praised for sensitive bravura, yet after her father's sudden death, she wakes nightly, heart hammering, fingers tingling as though keys still clatter beneath them. A family physician, steeped in Mitchell's lectures, confines her to a mahogany bedstead hung with pale damask curtains. He removes the household piano, declaring music overstimulating. Margaret's husband, bewildered but dutiful, signs the order. The first week is novelty. Bouquets arrive. Friends promise to call once she is strong. By week 2, curtains muffle daylight. Margaret's legs weaken from disuse. Dreams grow vivid. Sometimes she swears wallpaper vines sway, trying to speak. She begs the attending nurse for a novel, a letter, anything to read. The nurse, under orders, smiles apologetically and straightens the silver tray of milk glass. A few years later, American writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman endures the same cure after postpartum depression and emerges determined never again to surrender her pen. She channels lived terror into The Yellow Wallpaper, a short story in which a woman, locked in a nursery under rest cure rules, projects climbing women onto grotesque wall patterns and ultimately tears the paper apart in frenzied liberation. Gilman mails the tale directly to Weir Mitchell to save people from being driven crazy, though the doctor never responds. Her story, however, circulates quietly among women whose own wallpaper seems too loud for silence. Those without literary outlets resist in subtler ways. In a Brighton villa, Constance Bell invents private rituals while confined. She counts lacework knots on her counterpane, recites Shakespeare soliloquies in whispers, and moves 1 foot in hidden circles beneath sheets to remind herself she still possesses motion. When her nurse dozes, Constance scribbles poetry on scrap tissue with a cosmetic pencil, tucks it into her pillowcase, then sleeps easier knowing words survive somewhere near her pulse. In Manchester, a doctor named Elizabeth Blackwell, Britain's first woman to earn a medical degree, writes pamphlets critiquing therapies that reward passivity and punish intellect. She treats anxious factory girls with walking clubs that snake along the canals at dawn, teaching them deep breathing to the rhythm of oarlocks. Male colleagues scoff, yet several of Blackwell's former patients later testify that 5 Mile rambles accomplished what 6 weeks in darkened rooms never could. For those whose families cannot afford private nurses, public asylums wait. Stone wings labelled women's stretch behind iron gates on city outskirts. Officially, they offer moral therapy, fresh air in courtyard gardens, occupational sewing, Bible readings. Unofficially, overcrowding turns calm into cacophony. Ice baths jolt the sleepless. Rotating chairs spin the agitated. Leather cuffs guard against self-injury. Some nurses try to comfort, but schedules leave little time for gentleness. Anxiety here is noise, and the mandate is silence. Mary Jane Turner, seamstress committed for nervous excitement, discovers relief only when assigned to the laundry boiler. The hiss of steam, the rhythmic creak of paddles, drown thoughts that once pounded inside her skull. She learns to time her breath with each heave of wet linens, a primitive mindfulness practice that staves off panic better than the drafts, administered on ward rounds. Her discharge notes read, "Condition improved, tranquil and industrious." No one records that she cured herself, not the asylum. Victorian fashion literalizes tension. Steel-boned corsets squeeze floating ribs, compress lungs, and restrict diaphragmatic breathing, the very breath pattern modern therapists teach to quell panic. Women hence elevate shoulders for shallow breaths, increasing heart rate and creating dizzy spells mislabeled feminine fragility. Doctors treat dizziness with more rest. The loop tightens like laces, tugged by a maid's practiced pull. Temporal discipline adds another loop. Railway timetables divide days into strict minutes. Factory whistles regiment workers' pulses. Even households imitate industrial order. Breakfast at 8, callers at 11, afternoon calls precisely 15 minutes each. A single palpitation feels like dereliction in a clockwork culture. The anxious heart is a rebel tick in a room of synchronized pendulums. By 1890, murmurs of dissent rise. Feminist journals question why hysteria targets chiefly educated wives and daughters, while husbands are prescribed invigorating travel. British suffragist Florence Fenwick Miller speaks at Kensington Town Hall. Our minds are not fragile, ornaments to be locked behind drawn curtains. They are engines meant for motion. Stagnant, they foul. Applause startles even the speaker. The idea that activity could heal women's nerves finds receptive ears. Physicians at Queen Square Hospital begin small trials of work cure, teaching needlecraft to anxious men and wood carving to sleepless women. Results are promising. Patients who carve or knit show steadier pulses, brighter effect, sooner discharge. Even Weir Mitchell quietly revises later editions of his text, conceding that some excellent results arise when selected patients are allowed the benign distraction of light handiwork. Margaret Avery, our silenced pianist, eventually persuades her husband to move the piano back into the parlor. She begins with scales, hands trembling. Soon chord progressions recall muscle memory. Paradoxically, the activity once deemed overstimulating steadies her breath. Music fills spaces laudanum only blurred. On evenings when anxiety creeps near, she plays Chopin nocturnes until the final note settles like dusk on still water. The heart learns an older rhythm: press, release, tension, resolution. Victorian society does not yet dissolve its stiff collar of propriety, but hairline cracks appear. Magazine serials where heroines choose study over sanitarium, medical lectures, questioning endless rest, whispered circles where women trade breathing exercises as fervently as new hat fashions. These cracks foretell a coming century that will rename, reframe, and finally begin to research anxiety with genuine curiosity. Tonight, as lamplight dims in your own room, imagine lace curtains stirring above a quiet London street. A woman sits at her piano, releasing a breath she scarcely knew she held. Across the Atlantic, another woman dips a pen into ink, writing a story about yellow wallpaper and the danger of forced silence. Feel their small, steady rebellions ripple through time until they brush your own pulse. If thoughts quicken, remember, the nocturne. Tension can resolve. Hearts can learn new time signatures. Let that music swell gently in your mind. Soft chords, lingering resonance. Until, like Margaret, you exhale and let the final note fade into velvet hush. Outside, the fog drifts on. Inside, lace untangles, corsets loosen, and night grants permission to rest in the spaciousness of your own quiet breath. Vienna, 1901. Snow falls in quiet sheets over gabled roofs, muting the hoofbeats that once rang like small hammers on the Ringstrasse. Behind lace-curtained windows, a new ritual is taking shape. A patient reclines on a fainting couch, eyes half closed, voice half trembling, while across the room a bearded doctor listens in near silence, jotting fragments of speech into an ever-thickening notebook. His name, of course, is Sigmund Freud, and he believes the human mind is a house of many rooms, some bright with polite conversation, others locked, stuffed with memories, fears, and secret longings. If the patient can be coaxed to speak freely, the doctor says, hidden rooms will open, fears will drain, and the anxious heart will finally rest. Enter Maria Adler, a bank manager's wife whose life appears, by every bourgeois measure, complete. Reliable income, 2 neat children, weekly tickets to the Staatsoper. And yet each night, just as the mantel clock strikes 10, Maria's pulse gallops. Thoughts dart like startled swallows. Have I locked the door? Will the children sicken? What if tomorrow's errands unravel, and everyone discovers I'm an imposter? She tries lavender water, warm milk, brisk walks along the Danube. Still the dread returns, quiet at first, then loud enough to drown orchestral overtures. A friend presses a calling card into her glove. Dr. Freud, Bergasse 19. Maria hesitates. Respectable women do not discuss nightmares with strange men, but desperation overrides decorum. The following Thursday, she climbs a dim stairwell that smells faintly of pipe smoke and varnish. Inside, carpets hush her footsteps. Bronze antiquities line crowded bookshelves. Freud greets her, gestures toward the well-worn couch and instructs, "Speak whatever arrives in the mind. Judgment is postponed." His mandate feels both freeing and terrifying. Years of whispered worry suddenly granted audible life. Words spill, fears of illness, guilt over fleeting fantasies, a childhood memory of being lost in a crowded market. Freud listens, occasionally murmuring, "Aha," or "Tell me more about that desire to disappear." Maria leaves exhausted yet curiously lighter. Over months she returns, dreams scratched onto notepads, wolves at a window, a cracked teacup, an endless staircase. Freud interprets symbols. Wolves are father figures, teacups maternal fragility, and connects her panic to repressed resentment toward an austere nanny who taught obedience through silent scorn. Maria's anxiety, he concludes, is anger turned inward. For the first time, someone links her fluttering chest to biography rather than biology. The discovery is electric, yet progress stutters. Interpretation often feels like accusation. Your symptoms mask forbidden wishes. Maria wonders whether healing lies in uncovering truth or in pleasing the interpreter. Still, talking relieves an ache that laudanum never touched. Even partial understanding is a lantern in previously unlit corridors. Across the English Channel, psychoanalysis lands in Bloomsbury, drawing rooms, and Manhattan brownstones. Women who once endured rest cures now queue for the talking cure, eager to trade silence for speech. The divan becomes a cultural icon. Magazines sketch swooning patients beneath velvet drapes. Cartoonists parody bearded analysts holding pocket watches. Yet beneath satire, genuine hope throbs. Perhaps words, not withdrawal, can soothe a restless mind. American physician Dr. Smith Ely Jelliff opens a Park Avenue clinic, blending Freud with progressive social work. He notes that poor immigrant women describe panic not as demonic possession, nor feminine weakness, but as crushing worry about rent, tuberculosis, lost cousins detained at Ellis Island. Jelliff's case notes quietly criticize colleagues who hunt for infantile sexual trauma while ignoring poverty's grinding vice. The mind, he argues, is a mirror that also reflects the world outside the skin. Freud's theories, radical though they seem, sprout from patriarchal soil. He describes feminine development as penis envy, critiques little girls for trading active desire for passive longing, and labels middle-aged women who seek careers as cases of masculinity protest. When patient Dora terminates treatment, after Freud proposes her hysteria conceals forbidden love for an older man, he writes an essay blaming her transference resistance. The pattern is set. If a woman rejects interpretation, the fault lies with her defenses, never the theory. Still, psychoanalysis births unexpected allies. Lou Andreas Salome, writer, confidant to Nietzsche and Rilke, becomes one of Freud's inner circle, offering counterpoints from a woman's perspective. In Budapest, Sandor Ferenczi urges analysts to practice compassion over authority, insisting that patient and doctor share vulnerability. Seeds of relational therapy are planted, though decades must pass before they blossom. Trenches carve the French countryside as deep as unconscious rifts. Soldiers emerge shaking, mute, eyes wide as if still seeing shell bursts. Military psychiatrists label the condition shell shock. No uterus, no laudanum. Here anxiety disables men in uniform, challenging notions of bravery and weakness. Freud's student W.H.R. Rivers treats British officer Siegfried Sassoon not with rest cure, but with empathetic conversation, encouraging poetry as catharsis. The success lends new legitimacy to talk therapy. If speech can calm war's hell, surely it can soothe domestic dread. Back in Vienna, Maria Adler reads newspaper accounts of shell-shocked heroes and glimpses herself in their tremors. Her therapy continues, yet she now visits once a fortnight rather than twice a week. She volunteers at a convalescent hospital, teaching injured soldiers to sketch alpine vistas. When panic stirs, she practices a simple routine Rivers advocates. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 6. Trace the horizon with steady gaze. The technique, devoid of dream symbols or childhood confessions, often steadies her faster than analysis. Maria does not abandon Freud. Rather, she weaves new strategies alongside interpretation, crafting a personal tapestry of coping. Commercial chemistry advances. Luminol, phenobarbital debuts in 1912. Marketed for insomnia, bromides promise nervous sedation without mental cloud. Ads picture serene women beside slogans. Science conquers female restlessness. Yet, prescriptions caution, tolerance, dependence, unpredictable mood swings. Familiar echoes of laudanum's sweet ache remind physicians that cure and curse can share a bottle. Psychiatrists split into camps. Analysts champion words. Neurologists press pills. Some propose electric shock to reset cortical circuits. Patients stand at crossroads, choosing between introspection, chemistry, or compliant silence. Most try all three, seeking any doorway to peace. In 1928, Virginia Woolf lectures at Girton College, urging women to claim space and income for unhindered thought. What she omits publicly, but records in diaries, is her own skirmish with panic, racing pulse, grinding insomnia, auditory hallucinations of birds speaking Greek. Doctors suggest rest, she writes instead, pouring swirling consciousness onto pages. Words save her enough times that she continues risking them, proving that expression can be both mirror and medicine. Maria Adler, now silver-templed, reads Woolf in German translation. She smiles at the notion that a room of one's own exists not only in architecture, but in the mind, an interior study where one may examine fears under lamplight without shame. She realizes Freud handed her the first key. Her life's work has been fashioning the rest of the lock. The era of psychoanalysis will fade, make way for behaviorism, then psychopharmacology, then cognitive therapy. Yet each new school will keep traces of this moment, the vital act of listening, the premise that stories, dreamt or remembered, shape breath and heartbeat. Freud's biases will be challenged. His couch, though less worshipped, will remain an emblem of conversation's power. As your own night deepens, imagine Berggasse 19 after hours. Snow piling on the sill, notebooks closed, the couch empty yet, faintly dented by day-long confessions. Feel the hush after words cease, the mind's gears clicking into slower motion. You need not pass every dream tonight. It is enough to notice that beneath each anxious beat lives a story waiting to be spoken, whether to analyst, friend, journal, or listening darkness. Take one slow breath as rivers taught wounded soldiers. Trace an inner horizon as Wolfe did on the Sussex coast. Let Maria's journey remind you, understanding is mosaic work, pieces gathered over time, some from doctors, some from poets, many from your own patient observation. As snow quiets Vienna's streets, allow quiet to settle in you. The couch is empty, the night vast, and your mind, tender, talkative, resilient, has permission to rest until morning light. A new morning gleams across post-war suburbia, bright as a freshly waxed linoleum floor. Rows of identical houses stand at attention like pastel soldiers, each crowned with a white picket fence and a fluttering flag of domestic triumph. Newspapers trumpet record stock prices, television commercials, promise lives made effortless by Tupperware lids that burp and washing machines that hum a lullaby of progress. Inside these tidy kingdoms lives a woman named Helen Clark. Though she could be Edith, Dolores, Jean, or nearly any name stitched in cursive on an apron pocket. Her lipstick is impeccable, her smile practiced, yet somewhere beneath that pink-tinted curve a quiet tremor sets plates quivering in the dish rack. Helen's day begins at 6 a.m. with the metallic chirp of an alarm clock shaped like a cheerful rooster. She pads into a spotless kitchen, measures coffee, but feels her pulse skip. In the hush before children tumble down the stairs, she hears her heart thud far too loudly in her ears, as if reminding her that yesterday's worries did not evaporate with sleep. She inhales slowly, imagines the calendar. Bake sale Friday, PTA Monday, husband's boss for dinner Thursday. Hair appointment squeezed somewhere between grocery runs and Cub Scout badges. She is grateful for peace, for a roof, for the miracle of canned fruit in winter, yet each blessing seems bundled with invisible string that tightens around her chest. Medical magazines have a name for this sensation. Housewife's nerves. Doctors diagnose it with a sympathetic smile, writing in flourishes on pale blue pads. Take one tablet as needed, up to 4 times daily. The tablet is diazepam, marketed as Valium, though a slightly older cousin, Meprobamalt, nicknamed Milltown, still rattles in bathroom cabinets across the country. Advertisements depict a slender woman resting on a modern sofa, children playing quietly in immaculate overalls. You can't set her free, the caption confesses. But you can help her feel less trapped. A prescription tucked discreetly into a handbag becomes both invitation and apology. Here is scientific proof that your unease is real, yet also something best muted, not examined. Helen first swallows the small sunshine-coloured pill on a rainy Wednesday afternoon after nearly fainting while frosting cupcakes. Within 20 minutes, a velvet calm spreads through her limbs. Edges blur, colours dull pleasantly. Worries retreat like scolded pups beneath a porch. The relief is immediate, unquestionable. A hush descending on an orchestra tuned too sharp. She finishes frosting, sets cupcakes in neat rows, feels almost giddy as thunder rattles windows, yet fails to rattle her heart. Over dinner, she laughs at her son's joke, a genuine laugh, loose and surprising. Her husband, Bill, notices. You seem more relaxed, honey. That new vitamin doing the trick. She nods, unsure how to speak of the pill without sounding fragile. The ad, after all, told her to keep secrets. Serenity should appear effortless. She thanks him for mowing the lawn. Days slide into weeks. Each time Helen senses the flutter, when the roast burns, when the washing machine clunks ominously, she reaches for the pill bottle. She remains a model neighbour, hosts bridge nights, helps newcomers arrange roses in crystal vases, manages her children's tantrums with a smile edged in cotton wool. Inside, though, she begins to require an afternoon tablet simply to step outside the house to navigate the grocery aisle's sterile fluorescence without tears. Pharmaceutical companies track sales figures climbing like 4th of July fireworks. Doctors praise these tranquilizers in journals, citing minimal side effects compared to previous sedatives. They do not yet speak of tolerance, how one pill becomes 2, then 4, how brain and body adjust like ankles swelling around a too tight shoe. They do not tabulate the subtle erosion of color, the way joy and sorrow alike flatten under a persistent chemical ceiling. Across town, Joan Morgan tries a different route. She attends a newly formed coffee circle where women gather not to exchange cake recipes but to speak, with cautious honesty, about dread. They meet in a basement rec room, folding chairs ringed around an ashtray overflowing with lipstick-stained butts. The first week conversation wobbles, remarks about laundry, hints of fatigue, half jokes about children who never stop asking why. By the third week, someone confesses waking at 3 every night convinced the furnace is leaking gas. Heads nod, cigarettes flare brighter. Another admits she sometimes drives past her own block just to weep unseen in a parking lot. No one proposes tablets. Instead, they share small experiments, writing fears in pencil, then erasing them, stretching on living room rugs when heartbeats gallop, letting the sink soak overnight instead of scouring until 1 a.m. Helen hears rumors of the circle, but dismisses them. She doubts talk alone could silence the shaking. Yet one afternoon, after misplacing her pills and enduring an hour of raw panic sliced by fluorescent grocery lights, she parks outside the meeting place. Her breath comes shallow, palms gloss with sweat. Inside, she smells percolating coffee and Aquanet hairspray. Words swirl. Half-whispered misgivings about perfection, about husbands who believe dinner appears by magic. Someone quotes Betty, Friedan's new book, The Feminine Mystique, the phrase, the problem that has no name, trembling like revelation. Helen listens, neither agreeing nor fleeing, hands clasped so tightly that nail half-moons whiten. When she finally speaks, voice soft, she says only, "I think I'm tired of smiling." Silence follows, then a chorus of gentle me too. That night, she opens the pill bottle, hesitates, closes it again. Sleep arrives fitfully, but in the morning she wakes clear-headed, raw as scrubbed floors, yet oddly proud. She pencils the next circle meeting on the calendar between Girl Scout, carpool, and dentist appointments. The act feels rebellious, like wearing red shoes to church. Reality, of course, resists quick transformation. Doctors continue issuing refills with friendly efficiency. Helen still relies on tablets during PTA speeches or sudden arguments when her pulse sprints faster than words. But the dose remains half. She carries a notebook now, jotting racing thoughts, scribbling deep breaths in margins. In 4, hold. 2, out 6. She tapes a clipping on the inside of the kitchen cabinet. You are not alone. National Mental Health Hotline. She has not called, yet knowing the number exists steadies her. Television talk shows begin inviting psychologists who discuss the double bind of modern womanhood. Some guests scoff, claiming homemakers are lucky to avoid office stress. Others quietly share panic attacks hidden behind typewriter ribbons and ledgers. The audience applauds uncertainly, as though witnessing the curtain lift on a play whose ending no one knows. By 1970, Helen's children are teenagers, their noise a chaotic melody that sometimes frays her edges, sometimes anchors her in busy purpose. She still owns the prescription bottle, now renewed monthly rather than fortnightly, but learns that evening walks, radio jazz, and the occasional unapologetic no to volunteer committees build an inner scaffolding stronger than diazepams. Hush, she asks Bill to help with dinner twice a week. He raises brows, then shrugs, surprised how easily routine bends. Pharma executives notice a dip in sales. They unveil new ads aimed at men, Valium for executive stress. Yet the cultural shift has begun. Articles warn of dependency. Hotlines publish tapering guides. Helen sends her last, nearly full bottle down the toilet, watches yellow tablets swirl, imagines them dissolving in the city's hidden pipes. One summer evening, she stands, barefoot on cool lawn, sprinkler ticking like distant applause. Fireflies rise, small lanterns of persistent wonder. Her heart, free of chemical velvet, beats a rhythm she can feel yet tolerate. Alive, unblurred. The sky overhead swirls deep blue, not dulled to grey. She thinks of earlier decades wandering, wombs, of rest cures, of Freud's couch. Each era naming, blaming, soothing in its own flawed tongue. She does not claim final victory, worry still visits, but she owns her breath, her voice, her small basement circle of sisters who laugh too loudly and sometimes cry over burnt casseroles. They trade not prescriptions, but presence. Tonight, as you settle under your own quilt of century-later cares, picture Helen's backyard, the hush after sprinklers cease, the grass cool against soles, the fireflies blinking code that only children and poets fully decode. Feel the difference between numbness and calm. One erases edges, the other softens them without denying their shape. Let that distinction cradle you. You need not smile for any camera pointed through a virtual window. You can simply breathe, counting in 4, out 6, like a quiet rebellion past hand to hand across decades. If worry stirs, greet it gently, the way Helen lifts a firefly, then opens her palm to watch it rise. Some fears dissolve, some fly away, some flicker on and off, but never scorch. Under the dark blue dome of evening, let your heartbeat fall into its steady cadence, no pill dictating tempo, only the ancient metronome of inhale, exhale. The lawn grows still. Distant televisions fade to static, and in that deepening quiet, you too have permission to rest, unblurred, unburdened, wholly alive. A late winter night settles over a small brick bungalow in suburban Chicago, frost etching delicate, ferns across the kitchen window. Inside, the kettle's thin whistle fades as Ruth Delgado pours steaming water into a chipped mug, the scent of chamomile mingling with the hush of a slumbering household. The year is 1972. Her husband snores softly in the next room. Her children dream beneath posters of astronauts and pop singers, yet Ruth lingers at the table, notebook open, pen poised above a fresh blank page. Her heart flutters, not with panic this time, but with something new. Anticipation. Earlier that evening, she sat in a friend's living room. 12 women perched on thrift store sofas, knees brushing, coffee mugs warming tentative fingers. They called it a consciousness-raising group. Ruth had almost skipped it, worried she'd be branded ungrateful, radical, hysterical. Yet curiosity tugged harder than fear, and now her mind hums with phrases that refuse to sleep. Wages for housework, emotional labor. The personal is political. The women spoke of buried anxieties that surface while folding laundry, of resentments knotted beneath polite smiles, of doctors who dismissed pain with, "It's all in your head." Every confession sparked a gentle chorus. Me too, me too. The chorus lingers like a lullaby in Ruth's kitchen long after midnight. Across North America and Western Europe, small gatherings just like Ruth's blossom in basements, college lounges, even parish halls rented for a few discreet hours. Feminist writers, Betty Friedan, Audre Lorde, Kate Millett, have cracked open the sealed jar of housewife's nerves and poured its nameless ache into print. Women who once swallowed Valium to quiet the flutter now taste a different medicine, recognition. It burns a bit going down. Truth often does, but warms the chest more lastingly than any tranquilizer. In these circles, anxiety transforms from private flaw to collective signal. A sleepless night isn't proof of personal weakness. It can testify to impossible expectations. Breadwinner-loving wife, perfect mother, sexual muse, PTA treasurer, hostess with spotless drapes, all stitched into one tidy silhouette. When Carol, a high school math teacher, confesses her pulse, races before every faculty meeting because male colleagues smirk at her lesson plans, The group does not prescribe calm. They offer strategies, document comments, demand policy, breathe deep, but don't back down. Anxiety becomes catalyst, not cage. Academics begin to map what consciousness raising reveals. Psychologist Dr. Phyllis Chesler publishes Women and Madness, 1972, arguing that diagnoses like hysteria, borderline personality, even certain anxiety neuroses often mirror social punishment for female anger, grief, or ambition. She coins the term female-instigated coping. When hurt is pathologized, the sufferer learns to blame herself and seek sedation rather than justice. The idea lands in lecture halls and living rooms alike, turning shame into sharp curiosity. If my panic is a message, what is it trying to say? In Boston, a collective of volunteers prints and staples a groundbreaking booklet, Our Bodies, Ourselves. Plain-spoken chapters on menstruation, contraception, childbirth, and mental health circulate hand-to-hand across dormitories and laundromats. Women underline passages about depression and anxiety, scribbling yes in margins where they see their secret nights mirrored. Knowledge that once belonged to white-coated experts now passes across kitchen tables, as intimate as salt shakers. Therapy itself begins to change. At a community clinic in Berkeley, psychologist Dr. Laura Norton replaces the stiff leather chair with beanbags, invites clients to sit in circles, and teaches progressive muscle relaxation accompanied by feminist poetry readings. She calls it integrated healing. Name the systemic wound, then soothe the body that bears it. Clients practice deep belly breathing, air-filling space once cinched by decades of figurative corsets. Panic attacks still come, but now women greet them like stern messengers, asking, which boundary have I ignored? Where have I said yes when I meant no? On brisk spring mornings, strollers jostle alongside protest banners. Ruth pushes hers through downtown streets, a homemade sign, taped to the hood, daycare not Valium. She chants shyly at first, voice thin as March wind, but grows louder when strangers along the sidewalk flash thumbs up. Newspapers frame photos of rallies with sensational headlines. Women roar. Yet inside those crowds, anxiety flickers. In every chest, fear of police lines, of public speaking, of being mocked on evening news. Even so, each woman's jitters braid into collective courage. Where one falters, another steadies her arm. In that weaving of nerves into rope, vulnerability becomes resilience. At home, changes appear incremental but profound. Ruth and Bill sit at their Formica table, renegotiating chores. He'll cook 2 nights a week. She'll attend night classes in sociology. The conversation trembles, voices rise, but no one storms. Out. Later, lying awake, Ruth feels her heart quicken, not with dread, but with the thrill of uncharted possibility. The feminist movement does not demonize medication wholesale. Some women still choose tranquilizers or new selective serotonin prototypes under trial for depression, but decisions shift from reflex to informed choice. Support groups teach taper schedules. Newsletters print cautionary tales of withdrawal. Grassroots hotlines pair callers with peers who've walked the same chemical labyrinth. Treatment becomes both and. Pill when necessary, protest when possible, poem when words refuse tidy diagnosis. While suburban consciousness raisers sip instant coffee, women of colour navigate overlapping storms, racism, classism, sexism, often without access to Valium or private therapists. In Los Angeles, the Chicana feminist group Las Hijas de Cuauhtémoc prints zines addressing street harassment, factory stress, immigration raids. Anxiety here pulses to the rumble of sewing machine, lines and sirens, yet sisterhood forms in bilingual story circles lit by votive candles. Indigenous activists revive traditional healing. Sage smudges, sweat lodge prayer, drumming in tempo with breath, asserting that colonization itself breeds soul-deep unrest. Half a world away in New Delhi, journalists cover the first citywide women's conference on dowry deaths and domestic violence. Delegates swap breathing exercises and legal strategies, translating shared dread into multilinguistic advocacy. The feminist awakening is not one monolith. It is a constellation of local fires whose light travels far, illuminating corners where silence once reigned. In 1991, years before social media, African-American activist Tarana Burke hears a young girl's story of sexual assault and whispers, broken-hearted, "Me too." The phrase lives quietly in Burke's educational workshops, but its seed has already sprouted decades earlier in circles like Ruth's, where Me Too formed the backbone of healing. When Me Too finally erupts online in 2017, the rush of testimony echoes that 1970s basement. Confession met instantly by recognition, shame diluted by shared sunlight. Back in 1974, Ruth closes her notebook, pen finally still. On its pages, a draft letter to her senator about funding community mental health centers, a scribbled schedule for rotating carpools, a paragraph exploring the idea of going back to college full-time, unthinkable 2 years earlier. She blows on the ink, watches it dry, feeling her pulse settle. Anxiety has not vanished, but it no longer feels like a solitary fault line. It is a signal flare, answered by dozens of distant towers. She pads down the dim hallway, pauses at her daughter's doorway. Moonlight stripes the carpet. In whispered resolve, Ruth promises the sleeping child a softer inheritance. Less hush, less perfect smiling, more brave trembling voiced aloud. She crawls into bed beside Bill, who stirs, asks drowsily, "Trouble sleeping?" She answers truthfully, "Not tonight." If your own pulse flutters now, know you walk a path broadened by countless feet. By Ruth, by Tarana, by activists whose names never reached magazine covers. Each anxious beat they shared widened the route, making space for your steps. Their legacy is not the eradication of fear. It is the knowledge that fear spoken becomes lighter, braided into ropes that lift rather than bind. As you settle beneath your blanket, picture that first consciousness-raising circle. Thrift store sofas, mismatched mugs, a single lamp pooling warmth. Hear one woman clear her throat, confess a trembling she once called weakness. Feel the room exhale with recognition. Me too. Let that exhale travel across decades into your own lungs. Inhale courage, exhale isolation, inhale solidarity, exhale shame. Somewhere, even now, a late-night kettle whistles and another notebook opens to a blank page. The quiet revolution continues. Ink, breath, heartbeat, rest. Night settles over. An urban hospital whose windows gleam like chessboard squares against indigo sky. Inside, fluorescent corridors echo with the hush of rubber soles and the distant sigh of automatic doors. It is 1983, and somewhere on the psychiatry ward, a young intern named Daniel Cho sits at a metal desk, clicking a ballpoint pen while reading fresh pages of the brand new Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 3rd edition, the DSM-3, that has just replaced older volumes of Freudian nuance with a grid of numbered codes. Each line feels decisive. 300.02, panic disorder. 309.81, post-traumatic stress disorder. 300.01, generalized anxiety disorder. Daniel underlines symptoms. Excessive worry most days for 6 months or more. Difficulty controlling the worry. Restlessness. Muscle tension. The orderliness comforts him. After years of ambiguous nerves, grief and hysteria, psychiatry now speaks in checklists, almost like cardiology. Down the hallway, Angela Rivera waits on an exam table, fingers tracing the waxy crinkles of the tissue paper beneath her. She is 27, office manager by day, restless sleeper by night. For months her heart has race-walked through midnight, pushing her to pace apartment hallways while neighbors' televisions murmur game shows. Family advise prayers, friends suggest jogging, but anxiety tightens anyway. A belt 1 notch too snug. Tonight, Daniel will take her history using the DSM's crisp language. He will ask how many days she worries, whether she tires easily, whether fear arrives without provocation. Angela will nod, grateful for questions that seem to map her private landscape. Yet for all its precision, the DSM cannot ask about the layoff rumours at her workplace, the sirens that crescendo past her window, or the memory of a childhood kitchen where arguments broke dishes as easily as eggs. Still, naming her distress generalized anxiety disorder feels like progress, a stamp that justifies therapy coverage, and a small peach-coloured prescription pad entry. Buspirone, 10 mg twice daily. Across town in a modest clinic for Vietnam veterans, retired Sergeant David Huang sits under buzzing strip lights, answering similar questions. His mind loops through rice paddy night patrols, rotor wash raw, and the metallic scent of cordite. For a decade he called it bad nerves. Now the DSM grants him 309.81, a code that links nightmares and startle reflexes to something larger than his own willpower. The diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, does not erase the images, but it drapes a blanket of legitimacy over them. VA benefits and group therapy follow. In circle meetings, men and women recite the day's grounding. Exercise. Notice 5 colors, 4 sounds, 3 textures, 2 scents, 1 breath. The ritual feels simplistic, yet repetition breeds trust, and trust softens pulse. Back at Daniel's workstation, the fluorescent clock hums toward midnight. He completes Angela's chart, writes GAD, rule out PTSD, childhood neglect. Old. Supervisors might have blamed mother fixation or moral weakness. Daniel, born to immigrants who seldom spoke of war memories, finds solace in codes that normalize distress. Yet something nags. Angela mentioned she flinches when doors slam, that an uncle once threw plates at walls. Panic, then, might be a shadow, cast by past violence, not a random misfire of chemicals. The DSM lists Axis 4 psychosocial stressors in small type, almost an afterthought. Daniel scribbles, possible complex trauma, recommend referral to new women's trauma group. The trauma group meets Wednesday evenings in a church basement smelling of wax and instant coffee. Folding chairs form a loose ring beneath fluorescent halos. On her first night, Angela sits beside a librarian named Joy, who carries index cards of calming mantras. At the center, social worker Teresa Delgado opens with a gentle statement. Anxiety can be a rational response to overwhelming experience. Tonight we will practice asking not, why am I broken, but what happened to me and how can I soothe what remains? The phrase trauma-informed care is still young, but seeds sprout quickly in receptive soil. Members speak of alcoholic fathers, neighborhood shootings, medical emergencies. Each story loosens another member's tongue. The chorus of Me Too echoes faintly from earlier feminist basements, merging with clinical structure, storytelling, paired with breathing drills, journaling paired with diaphragmatic stretches. After 90 minutes, the group ends with a collective exhale, palms resting on rib cages, as if holding fragile birds. Far beyond this basement, a cultural tide rises. News anchors speak of anxiety epidemics. Universities add stress management, electives. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs, await FDA approval, promising fewer side effects than benzodiazepines. Public service announcements urge citizens to seek help early, as though anxiety were a leak to patch before flood. Yet stigma lingers. Office whispers question co-workers who take mental health days. Insurance forms require proof of persistent impairment before authorizing therapy. Some still call medication a crutch, ignoring that crutches are respectable tools for healing legs as much as minds. Meanwhile, Black and Indigenous communities note that diagnostic codes rarely adjust for chronic societal threat. Psychologist Dr. Beverly Green writes essays on race-based traumatic stress, arguing that anxiety can be a daily, logical answer to systemic bias. Her words ripple into graduate programs, urging future clinicians to widen their lens. At a community center in Detroit, facilitator Malik Thompson adapts trauma-informed circles for teenage boys who have lost friends to street violence. They journal rap lyrics, practice box breathing between verses. They call panic the shakes, grief, the heavy coat. But even unclinical language finds place inside trauma frameworks. Back in Chicago, Angela's 6-week check-in approaches. She walks to the hospital through crisp November air, pill bottle nestled half-empty in purse. Buspirone calmed jitter edges but did not quiet dreams. The trauma group, however, offered surprising relief. The act of tracing her own timeline on construction paper, marking each upheaval with coloured pins, gave shape to what once felt fog-thick. She meets Dr. Cho, who now greets her not with brisk clipboard nod but with genuine curiosity. How are the nightmares? How many grounding cards do you carry these days? Angela smiles. 3 cards now, down from 7. She mentions a new goal. Community college night classes in accounting. Anxiety still whispers, but hope speaks louder. Daniel updates the chart. GAD, partial remission. Trauma group continues. Patient reports improved agency. The phrase improved agency feels revolutionary. Medicine acknowledging power, returning to patient. After Angela leaves, Daniel attends a hospital workshop titled Trauma-Informed Practice, Safety, Choice, Collaboration. He learns to ask permission before every invasive question, to replace what's wrong with you with what happened. He practices speaking softer, giving clients control of office lighting, offering seating choices. Small gestures, perhaps, yet they widen corridors once narrow with authority. Into the 90s, the DSM-4 will refine definitions. PTSD expands to include emotional abuse, chronic illness, disaster survivors. Dialectical behavior. Therapy emerges, teaching anxious, minds to hold distress and self-compassion in the same palm. Eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing. Claims to refile traumatic memories through bilateral gaze. Mindfulness-based stress reduction imports Buddhist breath into hospital conference rooms. Options multiply like spring crocuses, some quickly wilting, others rooting deep. But beneath every protocol thrums a simple motive: to name hurt without blame, to offer care shaped by story. The late 20th century's greatest gift may not be any single medication or modality, but the language shift that allows Angela, David, Joy, and countless others to say in brightly lit clinics, "Here is my fear," and hear a professional respond, "I believe you." Now the hospital lights dim. Copy machines fall silent. Hallway wax glistens under janitors' careful mops. In Daniel's pocket, a pager buzzes once, routine vitals stable. He steps outside, breath frosting in moonlight, and realizes he can almost hear the collective sigh of patients slipping into tentative sleep, each cradled by a new word, a new code, a new possibility. You too may find comfort in names, diagnosis, description, or simply the gentle title person who survived. Naming is not a cage, but a doorway. When worry rises tonight, imagine Angela's coloured timeline pins, David's grounding practice, Joy's index cards, Malik's box-breathing teens. Choose one small ritual. Hand on heart, count to 4, exhale to 6. Let the code for your calm be older than any manual. Inhale hope, exhale judgment. In the hush that follows, rest in the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is training right now to ask you tender questions in a softly lit room, ready to believe the answers. A blue-white glow spills across your bedroom ceiling long before sunrise. It pulses every few seconds, tiny, insistent, painting the walls with ghost-light Morse code. Your phone, face down on the nightstand, has already tallied 6 messages, 4 work emails, 2 calendar nudges, weather alerts predicting rain in 3 hours, and a gentle suggestion from a wellness app. Have you done your breathing yet? You haven't even opened your eyes. Welcome to the 21st century, where anxiety no longer needs a formal invitation. It downloads itself automatically with every software update. If earlier eras blamed wombs or weak nerves, today's trigger is omnipresence, an electric heartbeat that never fully sleeps. The world is in your pocket, buzzing like a captive bee. Every ping is a question. Will you answer me now? Meet Kayla Chen, a 24-year-old graphic designer who works remotely from a downtown studio apartment, just large enough for a Murphy bed, a ring light, and 3 succulents named after Studio Ghibli characters. Kayla wakes each morning to a cascade of bright badges across her lock screen, Slack tasks from an art director in Helsinki, comments on her latest Instagram reel, Venmo reminders, push news of geopolitical tremors an ocean away. She tells herself she'll start the day with 5 stretches and a glass of water. Yet thumb muscle memory opens social feeds before her feet touch the floor. The feed is dazzling. Friends launching startups, acquaintances hiking volcanoes at dawn, influencers selling serenity in frosted glass bottles. Kayla's chest tightens in the old familiar way. A private hum that quickens her pulse, heats her cheeks, makes the tidy apartment feel one size smaller. In DSM terms, it's still generalized anxiety. In digital dialect, it's notification, fatigue. No bloodletting, no laudanum, just dopamine spikes followed by troughs wide enough to swallow confidence whole. The corporate mantra of the 1950s promised better living through chemistry. Today's slogan might read, better living through productivity. Offices have dissolved into dining tables. Commutes shrunk from highways to hallway steps. Work chats chirp at 10 p.m. because time zones blur and boundaries blur faster. When your living room is your conference room, how do you clock out? Miguel Hernandez, a cybersecurity analyst in São Paulo, tries to answer by color-coding his calendar. Green for focused tasks, yellow for breaks, red for family dinners. Yet algorithms respect no colors. When ransomware spikes at midnight, Miguel's phone shrieks emergency tones. He triages servers while toddlers sleep one door away. By dawn, his heart sprints, though his body lies still. Hustle, not drought or demons, keeps him sleepless. But the body registers threat the same way it did in medieval convents. Tremor, sweat, wheeling thoughts. A counterculture rises. Influencers preach digital detox, candlelit journaling, forest, bathing beneath redwoods. Scrolling through their curated calm can feel like standing outside a bakery window, inhaling pastries you cannot taste. Kayla downloads an app that tracks screen time, only to discover she now checks the tracker with the same compulsion she once reserved for likes. Rest becomes yet another metric, a graph climbing, or failing to climb, toward perfection. Psychologist Dr. Latoya Mills calls this self-surveillance spin. When care is quantified, steps walked, hours slept, breaths counted, the act of measurement can morph into another stressor. Dr. Mills teaches patients to adopt gentle data, once-a-week check-ins instead of hourly tallies, feelings logged in, colors or sketches rather than numbers. We are not spreadsheets, she reminds them in soft Appalachian cadence. Healing is allowed to be a little blurry. Neuroscientists now map anxiety circuitry in pixel detail. The amygdala lights like a silent alarm each time a headline screams breaking. But technology amplifies exposure. A medieval villager might witness one dramatic fire in a lifetime. Kayla sees wildfires on 3 continents before breakfast. The brain, ancient and loyal, cannot fathom that distant flames won't reach her door. So it commands cortisol into bloodstreams already caffeinated by cold brew concentrate. Doom scrolling becomes midnight ritual. Thumb flick, horror flash, micro hit of dread, repeat. Each swipe is a false vow to stop at the next headline, similar to the Victorian vow to lie still one more week. In both eras, the nervous system is captive to the treatment that prolongs the ailment. Yet against perpetual motion, a modern variant of those feminist basement circles takes root, sometimes literally. Community gardens sprout in vacant city, lots where neighbors weed together in phone-free silence broken only by bees and casual laughter. Kayla joins one on a dare from her therapist. The first Saturday, she kneels in damp soil, unsure how to hold a trowel. But rhythmic digging calms her hands. A grounded metaphor forms. Roots spread in darkness, yet steady stems above. By noon, her smartwatch buzzes time to stand. She chuckles, already on her knees in mud. Meanwhile, Miguel's company pilots a right to disconnect policy inspired by French labor law. Servers rotate on-call duties. Emails auto-bounce after 7 p.m. with polite reminders to respect rest. Productivity dips for a week, then rebounds higher. The experiment spreads to subsidiaries, then competitors. Boundaries once labelled lazy rebrand as evidence-based resilience. Amid a global pandemic, video squares replace physical circles. Angela from Part 11 now hosts Wednesday breath rooms, 20-minute Zoom sessions where participants mute microphones, dim screens, and follow a simple script. Inhale 4, hold, exhale 6, twice the quiet of the earlier trauma group, yet multiplied, across continents. Kayla logs in during lunch breaks, camera off, cat curled on lap. Miguel joins from a parked car between client sites. The square grid fills, then empties, leaving hearts a notch slower. In chat, someone types, "Me too, still learning." Another replies with a single sunflower emoji. Even digital, the chorus survives. Tonight, your own device rests on a dresser. Across the room, screen dimmed, buzzing disabled. Maybe you enabled Do Not Disturb. Maybe you powered down entirely. Either way, the absence hums louder than notifications. An unfamiliar quiet. Notice how shoulders inch away from ears, how jaw loosens. Your body, older than any microchip, recognizes nightfall as invitation. Picture Kayla closing her laptop, garden soil still under fingernails. Imagine Miguel setting away messages before sitting on a porch, strung with slow blinking fairy lights. Feel a city of routers still blinking, satellites still orbiting, news still unfurling. And yet, for this, 1 hour, none of it requires you. You are permitted a local horizon. Breathe in to a count of 4, hold, exhale to 6. Ancient code, no Wi-Fi required. If thoughts flicker like neon ads, let them pass behind eyelids the way clouds scroll across a morning sky, moving, shifting, dissolving. Somewhere across town, an influencer schedules tomorrow's post about digital Sabbath. Somewhere else, a teenager disables read receipts and feels lighter than any status icon could signal. The tide of information will return at dawn, but night is not a problem to solve. It is an ecosystem to inhabit gently. So nestle into the hush you have carved from brightness. Let chamomile steam mingle with cool air. Let breath slow to the speed of growing roots. Let the world spin unsupervised for a few hours. The screen will glow again soon enough. For now, your only task is to rest. Unmeasured, unmonetized, wonderfully, offline. Close your eyes and let the centuries peel away until only raw firelight remains. In that glow, imagine a figure crouched inside a limestone cavern somewhere in late Ice Age Europe. There is no alphabet yet, no pottery wheel, no polished bronze, only voices, embers, and the sure knowledge that winter will test every bone. The figure tightens a shard of sharp bone between calloused fingers, heats ash-black powder in a shallow shell, and then leans toward another person's ankle. Each puncture stings, each dot darkens, each breath steadies. Long before human hands, ever-pressed ink onto vellum, pain and pigment were married in skin, the body itself becoming our very first parchment. Millennia rush past. Now you are high in the Ötztal Alps, 5,300 years ago, where a lone traveller strides under a sky of pewter clouds. Arthritis gnaws at his spine and knees. He stops, unwraps his legging, and reveals freshly etched lines of charcoal crossing his flesh. They are not decorative, nor do they mimic animal fur or clan heraldry. Instead, each straight mark corresponds, quite precisely, modern scientists will one day discover, to acupuncture points that quiet pain. This is Ötzi, whose ice-locked body will surface in 1991, complete with bearskin cap, copper axe, and more than 60 such tattoos. He carries no written prescription, yet the remedy is etched where it can never be misplaced. The mountains freeze him in time. The ink holds his pain map even longer. recording both ailment and attempted cure. The scene shifts south to the banks of the Nile around 2000 BCE. Late afternoon sunlight paints the river bronze while papyrus barges slip past. In an airy courtyard, a priestess called Amine lowers her linen shift so another woman, perhaps a midwife, perhaps a fellow temple attendant, can dot her abdomen with soot soaked in date wine. Over the next hour, tiny grids, crescents, and diamonds appear across her belly, thighs, and breasts. They look like constellations, and in a way they are. Each cluster a silent prayer that the goddess Hathor will guard fertility, ease labour, and steer child and mother safely through blood and breath. When Amunet later dances at religious festivals, oil lamps will shimmer across those dots so that her skin appears to pulse like distant stars. A living hymn to the life-giving womb. Centuries will pass before archaeologists unwrap her mummy and see the same patterns still crisp beneath linen bindings. CT scans will trace childbirth scars lying directly beneath the ink, suggesting that her marks are more than ornament. They are both talisman and medical amulet, forged in ceremony, and worn until the border between flesh and faith vanishes altogether. Turn east toward the Altai highlands, where summer is brief and the horizon folds into waves of snow-capped ridges. Around 500 BCE, a Paziric chieftain lies inside a felt-lined yurt. Outside, reindeer graze. Inside, a tattooist flicks copper needles along the chief's shoulder in deliberate, rhythmic jabs. What blooms on his skin is no simple line, but an entire menagerie. Griffins clasping deer in talons, antlers that morph into eagle heads, tails that tangle into vines. The ink is not just ink, it is a passport to the afterlife, an announcement to spirits that the bearer belongs to mythic clans who ride between earth and sky. When that same chief later falls ill and is sealed into a log coffin beneath Kurgan mounds, permafrost will preserve those creatures with dreamlike clarity. 2,000 years later, excavators will peel back frozen turf and meet the gold-blue gaze of a tattooed griffin, its message still fierce: remember me. Nearby, a young woman, the Ukok Ice Maiden, undergoes a similar rite. Her upper arm hosts a sinuous stag whose sweeping antlers unfold into floral scrollwork. To modern eyes, it is high art, but to her people, it is both status and cosmology, a map of lineage and divine favour seeded in pigment the colour of storm clouds. She is interred with silk, felt, and 6 horses, as though every symbol she carried in life must gallop with her beneath the steppe. Across these vast landscapes, the earliest tattoos fulfill overlapping roles. They soothe the body. Ötzis, stripes hover above inflamed joints. Egyptian dot fields cradle womb and lower back. Siberian forms possibly align with muscle pains earned on horseback. They safeguard. Dotted nets catch wandering spirits. Griffins bare teeth at unseen predators. Even simple carbon lines might ward off infection by invoking ancestral attention. They proclaim identity. In worlds without passports, ink becomes autobiography, telling tribe, trade, marital status, or heroic deed in silent strokes anyone in the know can read. And they frame life's milestones in aesthetic ritual: adolescence, marriage, victory, pregnancy, burial. Each milestone punctuated by a new design, each design turning the body into a ceremonial scroll. Archaeologists read these dermal texts with infrared cameras and electron microscopes, translating soot granules trapped in collagen into stories of healing and belonging. Every new discovery, Christ monograms on Nubian nuns, thorny lines along Inuit cheeks, cross-hatch grids on Sudanese cattle herders, adds another stanza to humanity's oldest biography. Picture finally the thread that stitches all these cultures together: a dark hut or bright courtyard, a needle pricking, a hiss of breath as endorphins flood. One hand grips a stone charm, another guides the point. Blood beads, pigment sinks, the pain turns rhythmic, bearable, meaningful. When it ends, wounds are salved with honey, fat, or fermented milk. Days later, the scab lifts to reveal black or blue designs that shine like midnight ponds. No matter the continent or century, That moment contains the same equation. Pain, willingly, offered, permanence gained, identity declared. Let the fire die down. Hear snow settle on a yurt, reeds rustle along a floodplain, wind whistle through alpine passes. Somewhere in those overlapping nights, a tattooed traveller sleeps easier, believing the griffin will frighten away nightmares. A priestess rests with, dots warm under linen, trusting Hathor's embrace. A climber turns on aching knees, soot lines dulling pain. Now return to your own darkened room. Your skin may be blank or inked in modern pigments, but beneath it beats the same pulse that once guided bone needles and soot. Inhale and feel that lineage. Humanity marking itself against oblivion, writing hope in tiny wounds that heal into story. Exhale and let the hush of ages wrap you like a burial linen, fresh with myrrh and memory. You share kinship with every night watcher, whoever chose to carve meaning beneath the skin, and that kinship is older, wider, and gentler than fear. Rest easy. The first diary is complete, and it is written in flesh that glows quietly beneath the moon. A warm trade wind glides across the Pacific, teasing the crests of turquoise waves and carrying with it the distant thump of wooden drums. Follow that, rhythm until palm crowns silhouette a dusky sky, and you arrive in Samoa centuries before European sails blot the horizon. A young man kneels on a woven pandanus mat, flanked by elders chanting a lineage older than memory. Beside him squats the Tufugata Tatau, the master tattooist, holding two tools, a serrated bone comb and a mallet carved from breadfruit. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is hypnotic, steady as surf, sharp as sunrise, each strike driving soot-rich, pigment beneath skin that will soon be covered from waist to knee in the intricate geometry of the peya. He will not rise until the pattern is complete, days or weeks later, legs swollen but spirit alight. Every islander who sees those dark triangles crossing his thighs will know he has endured pain for honor, family, and the gods who watch the ocean's blue expanse. Across Polynesia, Samoa, Tonga, Tahiti, Aotearoa, the practice of tatau is both public archive and private covenant. There is no stone cathedral, no clay tablet. The body bears the library. Curving bands along a warrior's ribs recount voyages guided only by stars. Motifs curling around a woman's fingers announce mastery of medicine chants. A mother's chin lines honor children carried and children lost. The very word tattoo in English derives from the Polynesian tatau, the striking sound Europeans first heard when sailors under Captain Cook watched bone comb meet flesh in 1769. Ceremony governs. Every motion, the recipient's family sings to steady breath. Assistants stretch skin taut. Coconut oil glistens like moonlight on water. Pain is not misfortune, but admission fee. Proof that courage and community weigh more than solitary comfort. When blood beads, the tufuga wipes it with fresh banana leaf, never pausing the cadence. On completion, the wearer stands, trembling yet radiant, to receive salves of noni fruit and lolo coconut. From this moment forward, any wrongdoing will not shame one person, but entire kin, because the peya is not decoration. It is responsibility, etched in indelible ink. Shift now to ancient China, where Confucian doctrine proclaims the body a sacred gift from parents, not to be harmed. Within that worldview, voluntary tattooing is rare, sometimes condemned, yet branding skin is alive nonetheless, wielded by magistrates as punishment called chipei. A thief might leave court with the word robber chiseled into his forehead, a living billboard of disgrace. A dissident could be marked rebel, his exile made permanent by strokes of indigo. Here, ink is iron in linguistic form, an official sentence that cannot be appealed, but human meaning seldom obeys edict. In the 12th century classic water margin, outlaws become folk heroes precisely because of their tattoos. Dragons spiraling across backs, tigers prowling over chests, calligraphy stating vows of brotherhood. Fiction mirrors slivers of truth. Some soldiers indeed inked loyalty oaths on arms. Some mothers etched "Serve the nation with utmost devotion" onto sons departing for war. What began as stigma mutates into badge. Shame repurposed into fearless identity. Under Qing rule, 1644–1912, Siberian border guards, descended from exiled criminals, adopt elaborate sleeve tattoos of carp and lotus, as if to say, "My ancestors' punishment is now my armor." A single symbol bends beneath the weight of context, proof that inked flesh can out-argue any legislature. Sail east across the Sea of Japan to Edo period streets lined with lanterns and woodblock prints. Early Japanese records echo Chinese law, criminals branded with circles or stripes on foreheads, arms, or, even more humiliating, noses. Yet as urban culture blossoms in the 18th century, tattooing flips from curse to couture, fueled by three unexpected engines: myth, fire, and pornography by proxy. Myth in woodblock. Artists of the ukiyo-e, floating world, illustrate the Chinese novel Suikoden, Japan's version of water margin, with heroes whose bodies blaze with dragons and sakura. Street toughs called otoko date stroll pleasure quarters copying those designs, hoping brocade skin will impress geisha and intimidate rivals. Fire Brigade's brotherhood. Edo's wooden city burns often. Volunteer firefighters plunge half-naked into flames, water buckets swinging from tattooed shoulders. A full backpiece, Irizumi, becomes proof of courage. If you can withstand 10,000 needle strikes, you will not flinch before an inferno. Designs bloom, koi swimming upstream, perseverance. Peonies, nobility. Namazu catfish that rumor says cause earthquakes, defiance. Hidden erotics. Strict sumptuary laws ban silk robes on commoners. Enter the tattoo. Wearable artwork invisible, beneath cotton yet fully exposed in bathhouse steam rooms. Pleasure district patrons view inked flesh as clandestine luxury, a rebellion at once personal and erotic. By the late 19th century, Irizumi artists wield nickel needles bound to silk thread, dipping into vermilion, indigo, moss green, and soot black. Sessions last years. Skin transforms into scrolls where waves crash and heroes duel Oni demons amid chrysanthemum storms. Every motif is layered. A carp at river's crest promises transformation into dragon. A single maple leaf afloat on shoulder hints at melancholies. Beauty. Yet with the Meiji Restoration, Japan modernizes at breakneck speed to impress Western diplomats. Tattooing, deemed barbaric, falls under prohibition. Tourists, ironically, seek small souvenir tattoos from hidden masters. Japanese citizens risk arrest for full-body work. The art dives underground, eventually entwining with the Yakuza crime. Syndicates, whose allegiance oaths are signed not on paper, but in ink and missing fingertips. Where Polynesian Tatau proclaimed honorable duty, Yakuza Irizumi warns outsiders, approach at own peril. Only in 1948 does the ban lift, yet stigma persists. Public baths post "no tattoos allowed." Still, Irizumi survives in cozy studios where artists mix Nara ink by hand, pulling lines in the ancient Tebori push and poke method. Pain remains anthem, devotion, the chorus. Across Polynesian beaches, Chinese courthouses, and Edo back alleys, tattooing reacts to power like dye to cloth, sometimes absorbing, sometimes resisting. It can be golden seal or scarlet letter, act of worship or crime, open flag or hidden whisper. The constants are pain and permanence. The variables are who holds the needle and why. In Polynesia, community stamps skin to weave person into collective. In Imperial China, state brands deviance while individuals occasionally reclaim script for loyalty. In Japan, authority first punishes, then underground artisans steal palette and flourish it into world-class art. Different paths, but each shows ink's stubborn trait. Meaning never freezes. A mark that enslaves one century can liberate the next. Imagine now a moonlit veranda overlooking a Samoan lagoon. A newly tattooed youth limps into salt water, letting warm oceans soothe swollen thighs. Waves hiss across sand. Stars mirror thee, triangles now etched forever on his legs. Hundreds of years later, in a Shanghai alley, an outlaw rinses forehead wounds where characters once screamed his crime, now hidden beneath a band of cloth as he plots rebellion. Another leap. A quiet Tokyo apartment where a firefighter sleeps, half undressed, a phoenix rising over shoulder blades, wings spreading with each breath. These separate stories breathe in the same room of history, walls papered with drumbeats, imperial edicts, and woodblock ink. Your own night joins them. Maybe your skin is blank, maybe needle-kissed. Either way, mark or no mark, you belong to the lineage of humans who use the body as billboard, diary, armor, or prayer. Close your eyes. Hear the tap of bone comb, the shuffle of courtroom sandals, the buzz of Teberi needles. Pain, once sharp, dulls into meaning, and meaning, decades later, glows under bathhouse steam or starlight, or memory's gentle lamp, reminding each bearer, I was chosen or punished, courageous or condemned, but above all, I am remembered. Let that remembrance cradle you now. The drums fade on the tide. The courtroom is empty. The tattooist sets down his mallet. Your breath, steady and warm, inks its own invisible pattern across the dark. Pulse lines on the inner walls of night. Lullaby in quiet flesh. Sleep follows the flow of that ancient ink, slow and sure, until morning paints new designs in dawnlight. A damp wind rolls off the North Sea, flattening heather and rattling the wooden shields of soldiers who wait at the edge of a dark forest. Torches spit as drizzle meets flame. It is the 1st century CE on the far fringes of the Roman Empire, and legionaries, their bronze helmets gleaming, shift uneasily at what they see ahead. Painted men emerging from the mist, bodies stripped to the waist despite the chill, skin shimmering with swirls of blue that crawl across shoulders, spiral down thighs, and vanish into leather sandals. These are the Picts and Celts, and the Romans cannot decide which stings more sharply. Cold air on their own bare arms, or the sight of enemies who look half human, half apparition, as if midnight itself learned to walk. The blue comes from woad, a plant that, when crushed and fermented, stains skin the hue of storm-tossed seas. Legend says the dye also tightens pores and seals minor cuts, a practical balm turned visual thunder. To Roman chroniclers, these marks are barbaric. To the painted warriors, they are living banners, announcing clan, oath, and readiness to bleed for both. Some scholars argue that designs map mythic journeys, the curves mirroring river bends or constellations that shepherd farmers at planting time. Others insist the patterns hide protective spells, each not a whispered plea to gods of oak, sky, and stone. Whatever the truth, one detail endures. The ink is not for beauty alone. It is an unspoken drumbeat of belonging. The Romans eventually subdue portions of Britain, but never tame its ink. What they do tame is tattooing's dark twin, branding. In marble courts, magistrates condemn thieves by carving letters into cheeks or foreheads. F for fugitivus, escaped slave. C for calumnia, slanderer. Letters weep scarlet, heal into scar tissue, and stay forever. A single glance condemns a man to the city's margins. The body, once tribal flag, becomes iron chain. Centuries swirl forward. Sail tones snap in Atlantic winds. Wooden hulls groan. Gulls wheel above foam. The tattoo slips from forest to forecastle, where sailors carve their own cartography in indigo and gunpowder black. Literacy is scarce, but skin tells the tale. An anchor on the forearm proclaims a crossing of the Atlantic. A turtle stamped on calf means the equator is behind him, and Neptune has welcomed him into the ancient order of shellbacks. Swallows flutter near collarbones, promising that no matter how far a man sails, these faithful birds will guide him home. Pain is currency aboard cramped decks, where wages vanish in taverns and storms gamble with lives. During long watches, a sailor heats soot. With rum, fashions makeshift needles from sail-mending pins, and trades tattoos for a ration of grog or a story yet unheard. Each strike of the needle keeps boredom at bay. Each sting reminds the flesh that it still belongs to the living, not to the yawning mouth of the sea. In port towns, Lisbon, Liverpool, New York, sailors step ashore bearing diaries written in marks. Dockside children stare wide-eyed. Shopkeepers sigh, equal parts pity and envy, at men who have touched horizons they themselves only read about in penny broadsheets. Some captains ban tattoos, fearing infection or insubordination. Most look the other way, so long as rigging stays tight and cannons gleam. A cursed voyage might even prompt a captain to request his own small talisman. A crucifix behind the ear, a mermaid along the bicep, a plea to any deity willing to bargain with salt and wind. The year turns to 1891, and in a narrow New York workshop that smells of warm brass and machine oil, Samuel O'Reilly patents the first electric tattoo machine, repurposed from Thomas Edison's autographic pen. Needles now buzz instead of tapping, inks sink quicker, lines grow cleaner. Tattoos migrate from forecastles to circus tents where barkers shout, "Feast your eyes on the tattooed man, the tattooed lady." Captain George Costantinus claims 388 dragons coil his body after capture by Albanian bandits, untrue, but thrilling. Nora Hildebrandt spins tales of forced mark-making by Lakota warriors, also untrue, but tickets sell. Behind bright banners, the performers know a quieter truth. The stage offers wage and autonomy denied elsewhere. When Nora steps into the ring, spotlights glint off serpents winding her arms, designs as ornate as the lace she might never afford. Spectators gasp at the scandal of a woman in abbreviated costume, but their stares feel softer than the judgment she met on polite streets, where inked skin signaled moral collapse. In sideshow tents, tattoos bloom not as punishment, but as passport to a livelihood that pays in applause and coins tossed into velvet bags. As electric machines spread, parlour artists emerge, men like Charlie Wagner in New York's Chatham Square, and Sutherland MacDonald in London's Jermyn Street. Their studios, tucked between barbershops and billiard halls, glow red with kerosene lamps late into the night. A banker's son arrives in secret for a discreet emblem beneath a starched collar. A chorus girl requests a garter of roses around her thigh. A soldier home from Flanders asks for a poppy above shrapnel scars. Each appointment carries hush and revelation. The moment cloth lifts, truths appear that no confession booth could hold. While high society tiptoes into studios, the authorities of empire keep branding alive. In British-ruled India, soldiers of sepoy regiments receive identifying numbers on their ribs to prevent desertion. Australian penal colonies mark habitual offenders with letters denoting recidivism. Across the Pacific, US immigration officials photograph Chinese migrants, cataloguing existing tattoos as though potential crimes already etch themselves in pigment. Ink remains both lantern and shackle, freedom banner and bureaucratic snare. Yet, meaning slips like water through official fingers. In Glasgow shipyards, welders celebrate a first paycheck with crossed hammers on forearms. In San Francisco's Barbary Coast, dock workers swap hearts stabbed by arrows to memorialize bar brawls. And love's lost to consumption. Branding wishes to fix identity. Tattooing insists identity renegotiates itself with every heartbeat, every mile, every farewell. Early 20th century masters refine the craft into art. Maud Stevens Wagner, aerialist turned tattooist, travels America's fairgrounds, swapping needle lessons for acrobatic tips. Horiyoshi Afroime of Yokohama revives hand-poked tabori dragons, coiling across full backs, turning criminal stigma into silent opera of colour and myth. Their needles hum a lullaby of resistance. Nobody who owns the tool can remain someone else's canvas forever. Ink technology evolves. Aniline dyes, birth purples, turquoises, sunburst oranges. Hygiene improves. Autoclaves whisper steam, and glass jars of Vaseline gleam like small moons. Design vocabulary widens. Art Nouveau lilies unfurl on wrists. Union Jacks flutter on biceps. Portraits of silent film stars gaze forever from ribs. The tattoo becomes simultaneously portable gallery and confession booth. Each design a stained glass. Window onto private faiths and follies. Picture, if you will, one sailor from Liverpool, Thomas Malloy, disembarking in 1910 New York. Anchors on forearms, swallows on collarbones. A compass rose near his heart. After weeks at sea, he visits Charlie Wagner's parlour and sits for a new piece. The Statue of Liberty, swathed in banners reading Home of the Brave. The buzzing machine needles ink between salt-scarred freckles, and Thomas closes his eyes, remembering Celtic ancestors who once stained themselves blue to frighten invaders. The line from woad to electric coil stretches invisibly across 2 millennia and alights, buzzing, on his skin. Thomas returns to sea with liberty beneath his shirt. Freedom chosen, not enforced. A month later, in Marseille, a customs officer eyes the fresh tattoo but shrugs. France loves liberty too. Ink has outpaced the empires, forging its own union of myth and memory. Now, as night slips into your room, imagine a gallery where every tattoo ever made glows faintly beneath candlelight. Blue Celtic spirals flicker beside Polynesian triangles. Crimson roses twine around Japanese koi. And in the corner, a pair of swallows rise toward a skylight star. The gallery is silent, but never still. Each mark vibrates softly with the pulse of its wearer, warrior, sailor, seamstress, outcast, muse. Step into the hush, let pain vanish, let stories hum like distant surf. You belong as witness, and perhaps as bearer of your own secret ink, visible or invisible, made of pigment or pure intention. Breathe in the woad-tinted mist of ancient moors. Exhale salt spume from Atlantic squalls. Inhale the singed sweet smell of carnival torches. Exhale the oil and ozone whir of modern machines. When you finally close your eyes, the marks and their makers close them too, settling into a shared dark older than any empire, softer than any anchor rope. Sleep comes as the last needle lifts, the last torch gutters, and the gallery dims to a single ember that beats, steady and eternal, just beneath the skin. Neon spills across a rain-slick sidewalk in downtown Los Angeles, reflecting the candy-colored glow of a tattoo studio whose facade is half pop art mural, half speakeasy mystery. Inside, the low buzz of a rotary machine mingles with lo-fi beats and the faint scent of green soap. A young nurse named Maya Cho sits in a leather chair, sleeve rolled high, heartbeat steady, but eager, as artist Luna Reyes pulls on lavender gloves. Maya has chosen a peony and a tiger, drawn in bold old-school coils of black that will bloom with gradients of coral and jade. She wants to honor her Korean grandmother's resilience and her own fierce commitment to emergency room nights. In one sense, the design is purely hers. In another, it is a node in a century-long web of reinvention that stretches from Victorian sideshows to digital flash on Instagram grids. By the late 1980s, tattooing has crawled from carnival tents into art galleries. Seattle's Don Ed Hardy fuses Japanese Irizumi dragons with American sailor flash, while New York-born Mark Mahoney distills Catholic iconography into single-needle black and grey saints. In London, Lal Hardy introduces punk skulls with dayglow spikes. In Auckland, Maori artist Gordon Toy revives tamoko, carving spiral mokokawai onto women's chins exactly where colonial law once forbade. Suddenly, ink is both rebellion and reclamation. No longer the sole language of bikers and sailors, the tattoo parlor becomes a salon where accountants trade neckties for full sleeves and indie filmmakers schedule half-day sittings between festival panels. Technology accelerates everything. By the 2000s, Instagram acts as a limitless flashbook, algorithms pushing watercolor galaxies, dot-work mandalas, and hyper-realistic pet portraits to anyone who pauses longer than a heartbeat. Pigments improve. Vegan, hypoallergenic, UV reactive. Machines whisper instead of roar. Needles arrive sterilized in blister packs that click into pen-shaped wands like fountain nibs. But the revival brings ethical complexities. When a fashion house prints Polynesian tattoo on nylon bodysuits, or a pop star debuts a Moko-inspired chin line for a music video, indigenous critics push back. Cultural appropriation, they argue, empties sacred designs of context, turning genealogical code into decor for someone else's selfie. Social feeds host debates that would have taken months by letter. Who owns pattern? Can experience be trademarked? Does intent matter more than impact? The answers shift with every thread, but one truth stands. Ink may be personal, yet meaning is never isolated. It travels, borrowed or bestowed, along networks of power. Clinical studies catch up to folklore. University of Alabama. Researchers note that the repeated puncture of tattooing can elevate IgA antibodies, briefly boosting immune response. Psychologists at King's College London survey combat veterans. Those who transform limb scars into coiled dragons report lower PTSD flashbacks than peers who leave wounds untouched. Meanwhile, surgeons in São Paulo create areola tattoos so realistic they prompt tears of recognition in mastectomy patients who feel whole again. Still, for every story of inked healing, another surfaces of casual cruelty. Employers rescind job offers when neck tattoos peak above collars. Shelters turn away women whose visible hand ink triggers assumptions about gang ties. Stigma lingers like faint old ink beneath fresh color, reminding wearers that their skin is constantly red, even when no one asks for a translation. Inside, correctional facilities where improvised needles buzz with contraband guitar strings, another renaissance unfolds. Inmates practice single-line portraits and photorealistic wildlife using soot scraped from burnt styrofoam cups. Some create entire alphabets of secret symbols. A clock with no hands means doing time, the number 1488, poisoned by white. Supremacists hides in numerals. A single 5-point crown can spark a yard fight if misread. Upon release, ex-prisoners face a double bind. Remove the ink, expensive, painful, or negotiate meaning with a society predisposed to fear what it cannot decode. Community shops such as Redemption Tattoo in Boston now run Cover Friday, offering pro bono reworks. Swastikas shed feathers to become phoenix wings. Gang tags split into cherry blossoms. Pain paid forward becomes palette for reinvention. For all, many queer and trans clients, tattoos claim sovereign territory over bodies legislated by others. A non-binary teenager in Texas chooses botanical sleeve imagery, morning glories interlaced with oak, to eclipse scars from years of self-harm. Each petal over scar becomes a promise stitched in color. I rewrite the story. This skin is mine. In Buenos Aires, a trans man selects a compass rose spreading from sternum to collar, an internal GPS recalibrated after top surgery. Ink asserts presence beyond binary expectations, silently stating, I designed this map. Follow it if you dare. Religious rites shift too. Coptic Christians of Jerusalem still receive small blue crosses on inner wrists during Easter pilgrimages. But now the lineage merges with youth culture. Some teenagers add QR codes that link to Psalms. Elders shrug. Why not blend ancient faith with modern verse? Meaning never freezes. It absorbs novelty like skin absorbing pigment. What you reveal shapes who approaches. A knuckle tattoo signals defiance to a visa officer, but camaraderie to a warehouse foreman. A tiny semicolon on a novelist's wrist invites mental health conversation at book signings. A forearm barcode inked on a climate activist mocks consumer culture until TSA agents demand extra screening. Placement is a dialect. Behind the ear whispers, throat declares, face shouts. The face tattoo explosion of the SoundCloud rap era. Ice cream, cones, crying hearts, stay away cursives, turns stigma into platform. See me before you judge me. Yet the gamble is steep. Some landlords see only risk coded in permanent blue. Back in Los Angeles, Luna swabs Maya's arm with icy alcohol, applies the stencil. peony petals fanning beneath the head of a sky-faced tiger whose stripes echo Hokusai waves. With the first needle pass, Maya grips the chair, then exhales into the ache. Her grandmother once told her that peonies bloom richest after winter's bite. The tiger, Maya's own addition, guards hospital corridors where death prowls. Each stroke roars louder than breakroom exhaustion, louder than alarms of code blue. Pain is small, purposeful, minutes of sting traded for a lifetime of reminder. You are rooted and ferocious. 2 hours later, Luna wipes away the final smear of ink and blood, smoothing ointment across reddened flesh. Maya's arm throbs in time with her pulse, but her smile is steady. The piece is hers alone, yet it sparkles with borrowed rivers. Polynesian, courage, Japanese waveforms, Californian color theory, Korean floral folklore. It is collage and confession, protest and prayer. Outside, night mist gathers along Sunset Boulevard. Neon flickers. Another client walks in clutching a phone screenshot of a Norse rune found on Reddit. Meaning will mutate again. The studio closes. Streetlights hum. Maya heads home with a bandaged arm, mindful of instructions. Wash gently, pat dry, thin layer of balm, avoid chlorine and sunlight. Healing takes 1 to 2 weeks. Colors settle deeper, scabs flake, revealing new skin that holds story-like. Sapwood holds rings, pain recedes, memory stays. As you settle into your own nighttime stillness, picture all these modern markings glowing faintly. Maya's peony tiger, a nurse's serotonin molecule, a veteran's phoenix, a Maori scholar's, Mokukawa spirals. They radiate like constellations on the world's collective skin. Microhistories inked against forgetting. Some you see every day. Others hide beneath cuffs and collars, revealing themselves only in trust. Breathe in. Feel the faint buzz of a rotary gun echo through muscle memory you don't yet possess. Exhale. Imagine antiseptic, ointment, and the soft rustle of sterile paper towels. Whether your own skin remains untouched or adorned, you share a pulse with every human who has ever chosen pain in pursuit of meaning. Let that companionship cradle you. Pigment settles, wounds knit, colors bloom. Even in darkness, especially in darkness. Tomorrow the designs will read a little clearer. Tonight, they hum just under the surface, lulling the busy mind to stillness. Sleep then, in the hush of lullabies sung by needles long cooled, trusting that whatever marks you carry, visible or hidden, belong entirely to you. Night hangs over a devastated landscape in late 1944 Germany, a hush broken only by distant artillery and the sudden, bone-deep roar of a rocket engine testing in secret pine forests. The projectile is sleek, almost ghostly under floodlamps. The V-2, history's first object to graze the edge of space, conceived as a weapon yet destined to seed humanity's earliest dreams of leaving Earth behind. When the war collapses, wreckage lies scattered across Europe, but the blueprints, and many of the engineers, scatter too. Some spirited west in Operation Paperclip, others captured and ferried east to Soviet design bureaus. Out of the ashes of one conflict, a quiet, colder rivalry begins to kindle, a rivalry that will soon trade battlefields for the silent gulf above the clouds. Step now into the crisp air of an early spring morning in 1946, White Sands, New Mexico. Under a sky rinsed pink with desert dawn, American engineers bolt telemetry rigs onto repurposed V-2 frames. Each launch rattles adobe homes miles away. Each plume of fire sketches an impossible question mark beyond the stratosphere. Across the globe, in a snow-dusted complex near Moscow, Sergei Korolev sketches comparable questions into notebooks that must never leave his desk. He and Werner von Braun, once separated by ideology, now by oceans, pursue the same horizon. Build a rocket strong enough to heft more than explosives, perhaps a scientific payload, perhaps one day a human heartbeat. Through the late 1940s and early 50s, tension thickens like winter fog. Soviet newspapers hail heroic tractor yields while quietly accelerating missile tests at Baikonur. American newsreels showcase shiny automobiles and backyard barbecues, while defense committees authorize funds for ever larger boosters. Yet most ordinary citizens, lulled by post-war prosperity, sense only a distant hum of competition, not the oncoming thunder. Everything changes on an October evening in 1957. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet Midwestern field, head tipped back, breath clouding the air, when a tiny star begins to move across the sky, too fast and too regular to be meteor or aircraft. It pulses, a faint beep-beep riding radio static into backyard transistor sets, and in that instant, the world tilts. Sputnik 1 is no bigger than a beach ball, yet its orbit proves that the Soviet Union has mastered a launch vehicle powerful enough to fling metal around the Earth. Governments call emergency sessions. School boards scramble to add calculus. Families glance uneasily at kitchen radios, wondering if that gentle beep could herald something far less gentle someday. Less than a month later, Sputnik 2 rises, carrying Laika, a stray dog trained to sit still amid shaking metal and the unforgiving physics of ascent. She will not return alive. Even Korolev's engineers admit as much, but her orbit cracks open a new realm of possibility and sorrow. The line between living Earth and lifeless vacuum has been crossed by a beating heart, and no one can pretend the threshold is merely theoretical any longer. Across the Atlantic, the United States scrambles to respond with Project Vanguard, a slender white rocket that wobbles, lifts 30 centimeters, and collapses in a ball of orange flame broadcast. Live to millions. The humiliation is sharp but not fatal. Within weeks, the Army's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reconfigures von Braun's Jupiter-C into Explorer 1, which slips into orbit on the first night of February 1958. Instruments aboard detect the Van Allen radiation belts, proof America's answer will carry science as well as pride. Even so, the scoreboard reads Soviet 2, United States 1, and the race for the next milestone intensifies. Behind closed doors in Washington, legislators sign the act, birthing NASA, a civilian agency whose seal shows stars reflected in a red vector, hinting that exploration might someday transcend warfare. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Korolev presses for an orbiting cosmonaut. He selects a shortlist of pilots, young, small-framed, possessing both nerves of steel and the cordial smile favored by propaganda posters. Foremost among them is Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin, the son of a carpenter and a dairy farmer, who once watched invading aircraft strafe his village and vowed to rise higher than their reach. Training is grueling. Centrifuges that spin until vision tunnels, isolation chambers echoing with one's own heartbeat for days, parachute drills in winter wind that snaps like rifle fire. Yet Gagarin keeps a calm grin, pockets candy for technicians, and in flight simulators hums folk tunes to steady breath. His easy composure hides an iron resolve. He writes in a notebook that the first man in space must carry the trust of all mankind, not only his own flag. April 12th, 1961, dawns pale and windless at Baikonur. The Vostok 1 capsule, barely room for a curled pilot, perches atop an R-7 rocket, painted the color of faded sea glass. Engineers check last cables, then retreat. The launch. Tower pivots away like a giant metal curtain drawn aside for a cosmic premiere. Inside the cabin, gauges flicker dull green, and Gagarin radios a single word that will echo through history. Poyakali! Let's go! The engines bloom, the step shakes, and the rocket climbs into a thinning blue that shades to velvet, black. 9 minutes lift him to orbit. 96 minutes later, after circling Earth once, he ejects over Saratov Oblast, floats beneath a red and white parachute, lands in a field where a farmer and her granddaughter stare at his orange suit. In astonishment, he grins, says gently, "Don't be afraid. I am a friend. I come from space, and I must find a telephone to call Moscow." With that gentle reassurance, the space age gains its first human voice, and the contest between superpowers ascends, from hardware to flesh and bone. Headlines span continents. Children cut out photos of the smiling cosmonaut. Kennedy's advisors urge a bold response lest the nation concede the heavens entirely. 7 weeks later, Alan Shepard rides a Mercury Redstone on a suborbital hop, the first American to taste weightlessness. His 15 minutes cannot erase the Soviet lead, but the gap narrows, and a new goal crystallizes: the moon. For tonight, however, the race pauses at a starlit edge. Somewhere over the Pacific, the spent shell of Vostok 1 still drifts, tiny orbit, adjusted by the faintest breath of solar wind. Down below, radios that once carried Sputnik's heartbeat now replay Gagarin's triumphant laugh. The planet, seen from his capsule, was a swirl of blue and cloud with no borders drawn. In the quiet between political speeches and marching bands, a softer realization emerges. If a carpenter's son can orbit Earth and land gently in a farm field, perhaps the sky is wide enough for more than rivalry. Perhaps, for the span of a single heartbeat, the whole planet can look up and feel one pulse. As you lie beneath your own ceiling of painted plaster, imagine that distant curve of horizon sliding past Vostok's window, sunrise rushing across continents in the time it takes to close your eyes. Feel the slow tumble of weightlessness, the hush where engines have cut and only heartbeat drums against suit fabric. Breathe in, as if drawing the thin tang of ionized oxygen. Breathe out, releasing ground-bound worries to float behind the capsule like forgotten booster stages. Somewhere, a satellite still whispers its steady beep across star-spattered dark lullaby of orbit. Let it soothe you the way it once startled a world awake. Tomorrow the race will sprint toward lunar footprints and television relays, but tonight, orbit is enough. And silence, and the gentle certainty that even under fierce flags, every traveler who slips earthward in a parachute greets the nearest stranger with the same simple hope. Don't be afraid. I am a friend. The promise is spoken beneath a canopy of oaks on a humid May afternoon in Washington. Before this decade is out, we will land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. Cameras whir, pencils scratch, and in living rooms. Across the country, people glance up from coffee cups in startled silence, trying to imagine a footprint pressed into dust no human eye has yet seen. The calendar reads 1961, the same year Yuri's laughter drifted down from orbit, but suddenly the horizon has leapt outward by 250,000 miles. While legislators debate budgets, engineers confront the sheer arithmetic of the vow. To reach lunar distance, they must stack explosions atop explosions, cradle fragile life inside an aluminum egg, then guide that egg into the gravitational embrace of a world that has circled in silence since Earth was young. Failures come first. Test boosters topple into marshes at Cape Canaveral, heat shields crack in static fire trials, pressure suits rupture along hidden seams. Yet inside cavernous hangars scented of kerosene and new paint, a quiet conviction takes root. If equations close, courage will follow. Project Mercury gives way to Gemini, twin-seater capsules that practice orbital ballet high above Florida thunderstorms. Astronauts learn to breathe canned oxygen for days, to nap floating head down, to twist wrenches while Earth spins beneath like a lit globe in a classroom darkened for a film strip. One June evening in '65, Ed White unhooks himself and drifts outside, tethered only by a gold umbilical glittering in sun. His gloved hand squeezes a small thruster pistol. He spins slowly, laughing through the crackle of radio, transfixed by the sight of his own boots floating over the dawn edge of planet. For the first time, an American body becomes a tiny moon to Earth, and 1 million schoolchildren pressed to TV screens later remember thinking space looked less like horror and more like deep water dreaming. By 1967, the Apollo command module stands taller than a 3-story house. During a ground rehearsal, a stray spark races through pure oxygen. Fire consumes wiring in seconds. 3 astronauts cry out once and go silent. Doors jam. Smoke billows. The nation grieves, and in apartments where the moon dream once glimmered, like a silver challenge coin, hope dims to embers. But engineers scour charred metal, redesign hatches to blow outward, reroute every cable. Lessons are mortared with sorrow. Perseverance returns, quieter but steel cord. 2 Christmases later, Apollo 8 arcs beyond the gravitational leash of home. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders become the first humans to slip behind the lunar far side, radios muted by 2,000 miles of rock. In that radio darkness, Anders snaps a photograph. Blue-white Earth rising above grey horizon, a fragile marble in black forever. When NASA prints the image after splashdown, poets swear they hear oceans inside it. Environmentalists find a banner. Presidents see a reminder that borders are pencil strokes on a ball of cloud. July approaches with summer humidity so thick cicadas drum slower. Saturn V No. 5 groans on Pad A, its 5 engines wide as cathedral doors, fuel chilled to a cold beyond winter. Inside the command module, Neil Armstrong reviews checklists. Buzz Aldrin adjusts gloves. Michael Collins hums a patriotic march under his breath, though he will later admit he was simply keeping fear from staging a mutiny. In his chest, launch morning dawns cobalt, then gold. Cameras track contrails. At ignition, the ground quakes like mythic beasts waking. The rocket rises, trailing thunder that rattles dishes in kitchens 50 miles away. 3 days drift across star-speckled velvet until the lunar surface fills every window, crater rims sharp as torn tin. Armstrong and Aldrin cram into the spidery lander, Eagle, separate from Collins, who will remain caretaker of the mothership. Descent starts smooth, then guidance computer blinks, overloaded. Alarms ring, unfamiliar. Mission control holds breath, behind cigarette haze. Armstrong takes manual control. Altitude callouts tumble rapid fire. 100 feet, 60, 30. Dust spirals, fuel drops to seconds. Contact light glows sapphire, and his voice, calm as classroom chalk, crackles. Home. Houston Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. 6 hours later, a lamp clicks on inside the tiny cabin, and a ladder unfolds to press its pads into virgin regolith. Armstrong descends gingerly, pauses, then steps. His boot print stays crisp. Nothing erodes it except time measured in meteorite. Whispers. Aldrin follows, calling the view magnificent desolation, a phrase that will outlive him. For 2 hours they bounce in 1/6 gravity. Plant flags, set seismographs, gather rocks dense with secrets older than life itself. Up above, Collins orbits alone, watching the black horizon swallow, then reveal Earthrise every 2 hours. Feeling, at once, the loneliest and most privileged soul alive. When they return, ticker tape snows along Broadway, choirs sing in cathedrals, children practice signing their homework, future astronaut. Yet the achievement does not end the race. It reframes it. From now on, the question is not if humans can leap cosmic distances, but how wisely they will walk afterward. Apollo flights continue, each mission fine-tuning lunar science, until Apollo 17 lifts in December 72, its ascent flames painting a final golden torch across pre-dawn sky. By then, public fascination has cooled. Nightly news joins. Watergate and oil shocks. Budgets tighten. The moon returns to quiet. NASA pivots to Skylab, orbit's first American home, where astronauts study sun flares and watch thunderstorms crawl like electric spiders across continents. One crew sets an endurance record of 84 days, proving bodies can adapt to weightlessness without unraveling. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union launches Salyut Laboratories, then Mir, a modular city of silver tubes where cosmonauts float through hatchways like commuters in a slow-moving dream. International handshakes materialize in microgravity during Apollo-Soyuz, a docking that trades Cold War suspicion for shared air hoses and joint experiments with tomato seeds. Gradually, nations realize that orbit is less a battlefield than a commons, a vantage point where hurricane eyes glare enormous, and fragile towns look indistinguishable from rival capitals. The 1980s introduced the space shuttle, a winged truck designed to fly again and again. Columbia slips from California desert runway looking almost unscathed, and schoolchildren cheer as Challenger lifts teacher Krista McAuliffe toward the stars, until icy O-rings betray, solid rockets flare sideways, and hearts drop 60,000 feet into the Atlantic. Yet once more, engineers rebuild, families heal slowly, and discovery roars skyward, carrying Hubble's telescope, whose first flawed mirror will eventually sharpen to reveal galaxies like scattered rose petals 10 billion years away. On a cold November dawn in '98, a Russian Proton rocket lofts the first module of the International Space Station, Zarya, and 16 nations sign on to add laboratories, trusses, solar wings bright as new leaves. Astronaut Peggy Whitson will one day orbit the equivalent of 365 Earth days up there, growing zinnias that bloom and tremble in recycled cabin air. Canadian Chris Hadfield will sing David Bowie while Earth spins blue below, turning isolation into art. Outside the porthole, discarded boosters glitter in distant sun like artificial constellations, and humanity's presence becomes a faint, continuous murmur. Fans whirring, laptops blinking, hearts beating at 17,000 miles per hour. Zero-G life is not heroic splash headlines. It is everyday tasks rendered gently strange. Tears forming perfect shimmering spheres, coffee erupting from pouches like caramel comets. The simple wonder of sunrise whipping around once more before a bedtime email can be finished. The promise, spoken beneath those oaks years earlier, man on the moon, safe return, has expanded. It now includes multinational experiments on protein crystal growth, cross-culture holiday dinners where samovars clink beside peanut butter tubes, and a generation of children who consider Earth not vast but cozy. A single luminous neighborhood, glimpsed whole from 200 miles up. As night wraps around your own room, imagine slipping weightless through ISS cupola windows, elbows braced against still warm metal, watching auroras shimmer electric green over polar darkness. No border. Fences glitter where continents meet. Only rivers of city light, tracing stories written by billions of unseen hands. Breathe steady, hearing the faint hiss of recycled air. Remember the carpenter's son, the test pilot engineers, the seamstresses who stitched pressure suits on Houston, sewing machines, all threaded into this orbital lullaby. Exhale and let gravity feel optional for a heartbeat. Let thoughts drift like dust motes in still cabin air. Tomorrow boosters will thunder again, but tonight the station coasts soundlessly, and in that hush, humanity rests together. Fragile, determined, held aloft by a promise still unfolding. The launch pad no longer sits on a military reservation, guarded by Cold War sentries. It rises from a slab of reclaimed marshland on the Texas coast, where shorebirds scatter at the thunder of a rocket taller than the Statue of Liberty, and broader through the hips than the stoutest Saturn V. Its stainless steel hide catches dawn, so fiercely it looks as if sunrise has been hammered into a single reflective column. Onlookers balance phones on rental car roofs, murmuring brand names that would have sounded like Pulp Fiction half a century earlier. Falcon, Dragon, and now Starship, the centerpiece of a private company called SpaceX, whose mission statement reads less like government procurement and more like a line of stubborn poetry. Make life multiplanetary. When the engines light, the ground drum rolls, seagrass bows, livestream captions stutter between awe and technical readouts. 17 million viewers watch from couches and classroom smartboards as methane oxygen plumes bloom orange into pale sky. At the apex of its debut test flight, the booster flips, belly down, and descends in a controlled fall that looks reckless until grid fins bite air and engines gimbal to swing the whole stainless cathedral upright. It kisses the pad in a bloom of dust. For the first time since the moon landings, children sketch rockets not as disposable fireworks, but as boomerangs that come home to fly again next week. Reusability is more than a clever trick. It changes math so dramatically that mission planners redraw spreadsheets like merchants discovering teleportation. A single Falcon 9 booster now turns around in under a month, sometimes flying 8, 9, 10 times. The price per kilogram to orbit plummets from $20,000 in shuttle days to under $3,000, with ambitious whispers of 200 once Starship graduates from prototypes to workhorse. This financial physics invites new players, Argentine nanosatellite startups, Ghanaian climate monitors, high school robotics clubs whose CubeSats tweet selfies after deployment. Orbit thickens into a campus, crowded yet strangely collegial, each object a homework assignment pinned to the blackboard of space. Astronomers grumble about streaks across long exposure photos, and regulators scramble to write traffic laws for the celestial interstate. But even critics admit a certain wonder in watching boosters pirouette back to landing barges named, "Of course I still love you," and just read the instructions. Literary nods that frame engineering as chapter in an epic, not footnote. Governments do not surrender the frontier. In 2017, NASA unveils the Artemis program, named for Apollo's twin sister, to plant the first woman and first person of color on the lunar South Pole. The plan reads like a braid of public funding and private muscle. SpaceX wins the contract to develop a human landing system, while the Space Launch System, SLS, a cousin of shuttle engines stretched and reborn, lofts Orion capsules carrying crews into lunar orbit. In November 2022, Artemis the Fun circles the moon uncrewed, testing heat shield, tiles and deep space comms. Its camera captures Earthrise again, higher resolution, same fragile swirl. Children compare it to Anders's 1968 snapshot and notice continents tinted by wildfire haze. The photo becomes a syllabus for climate urgency. The tagline, "We are, going back to learn how to stay," trends on teacher TikTok. Meanwhile, engineers at Houston's Neutral Buoyancy Lab choreograph polar suit rehearsals in a giant swimming pool chilled to mimic lunar shadow. They practice drilling ice cores that hide inside perpetual night craters, believing water ice can crack into hydrogen for fuel, oxygen for breath, a depot for Mars journeys yet unlaunched. Outside the training bay, an intern tacks a hand-drawn sign. "Our nearest gas station is 240,000 miles away. Please don't forget the sample bags." Back in Texas, Starship prototypes advance from short hops to orbital attempts, shedding fins and acronyms: SN-15, Ship-24, Booster 9. Each launch abort or explosion spawns memes of rapid unscheduled disassembly, but engineers treat failure like rehearsal dinner, an event to celebrate, study, and surpass. The ethos echoes every frontier ever crossed: test, break, rebuild stronger. Critics warn of environmental risk, sonic booms, billionaire ego. Proponents counter with spreadsheets. A fully reusable Starship could drop cargo cost to orbit below $100 per kilo. At that price, a 6-person Mars transport becomes line item, not fantasy. SpaceX publishes artist renders of domed habitats glowing on ruddy plains, solar farms fanned like origami across ochre dust, and a fleet of starships parked tail first like silver pines. Comment sections ignite. Can algae farms outpace perchlorate toxicity? How will law work on a planet's sunrise every 24 hours and 37 minutes? Philosophers revive debates about ethical terraforming. Architects produce VR tours of basalt fiber arches. Through every argument runs a quiet thrill: the horizon has moved again. Competition thickens. Blue Origin tests reusable New Shepard hops for space tourism, then unveils methane-fueled New Glenn for payloads. Vowing lunar cargo landers named Blue Moon. Rocket Lab lifts clusters of microsats from a New Zealand peninsula, snaring boosters mid-air with helicopters. The China National Space Administration builds a robotic research station near lunar Shackleton crater and plans crewed Long March 10 rockets to follow. Europe eyes Ariane next, India upgrades Gaganyaan crew modules, and startup Relativity Space 3D prints entire boosters in factory rooms where robotic arms dance like synchronized flamingos. Space is no longer a duel, it is a bazaar. Loud, inventive, occasionally reckless, but undeniably vibrant. Regulators hurry to patch holes. Who cleans dead satellites, governs lunar mining, adjudicates accidents light seconds away? The treaties are drafts. The future, a negotiation in multiple languages. Amid fireworks of heavy lift demos, quieter missions proceed. A SpaceX Dragon ferries CRISPR tomato plants to the ISS. ESA's JUICE probe slips toward Jupiter's icy moons, launching atop an Ariane 5 that will never fly again, its sunset making room for sunrise models. A private telescope array in low Earth orbit offers time slots to high school classes bidding, with essays instead of cash. In rural Kenya, a student named Amina directs the array to image Galaxy M101, inspired by the thought that her request travels at light speed to a machine she may one day help upgrade. Back on the ISS, astronaut Victor Glover programs a 3D printer to carve wrenches from recycled plastic packaging. He live streams the process to middle schoolers, calling it the Cosmic Lemonade Stand, squeezing value from yesterday's trash into tomorrow's toolkit. Viewers type emojis of rockets and Earths because words scarcely capture the blend of mundane and miraculous. The coastal air is humid again. Different latitude, different ocean, yet the hush preceding a landing burn feels universal. You stand miles away watching a point of light descend, a Falcon 9 first stage, returning from its 11th journey. The engines ignite in a blossoming hush, louder on video than in person, subwoofers of flame modulating to cushion 20-story steel onto a drone ship that bobs like a gull. Applause erupts from phone speakers. In the silent gap afterward, you realize the horizon has kept its promise. Humans can choreograph fire with such elegance that rockets fall upward into history, then step gently home. Later, somewhere beyond, city glare, you crane your neck and count dots sliding across star-speckled velvet. Satellites from a broadband constellation called Starlink. Debate flickers. Some curse the streaks, others cheer rural Wi-Fi. Yet the bigger fact hovers overhead. We have built an infrastructure that wraps the planet like electronic ivy, all rooted in the soil of rocket stages, landing with feet forward, grace. As you settle into tonight's quiet, imagine the Launch Control Center lights dimmed, except for consoles blinking go, no-go green. Engineers sip lukewarm coffee, knowing that while they rest, servers simulate burn profiles, and star trackers calibrate in dark hangars. Somewhere a pressure suit hangs ready, visor polished, name patch stitched with humility. Mission patches, designed months ago, wait in tidy stacks. A 7-year-old in Jakarta saves pocket money for a telescope kit. A retiree in Dublin refreshes tracking software to photograph the next booster re-entry. Across time zones, hearts sink in anticipation. Dawn, kerosene scent, and the low-frequency promise that tomorrow we rise again. Breathe with them. Steady. Curious. Exhale the weight of ground. Let eyelids fall like fairings separating after. Thrust is spent. In that drifting moment before sleep, hear a distant countdown. 10, 9, ignition sequence start, and feel the cushion of engines lighting beneath dreams sturdy enough to carry you, softly, into orbital night. The future hums just above highway silence, all engines throttled for the long ascent, and in the hush between pulses, hope holds the line. The house is quiet except for the slow, rhythmic pulse of a bedside clock, and the soft swirl of night pressing gently against the window pane. Outside, the world turns on its ancient axis, oceans tugged by the moon, satellites sliding like silver beads along invisible threads, fireworks of aurora sparking over polar darkness. Inside, a single lamp glows warm on the final blank page of a well-worn notebook. You sit at the edge of the bed, pen poised, wondering how to gather thousands of years, wandering wombs and battlefield blue men, restless housewives and orbiting carpenters' sons, into one last lullaby that will carry the mind and the heart towards sleep. Begin with breath. It is the oldest rhythm you know, older even than gods carved from mammoth ivory or needles dipped in soot. Inhale through the nose. Feel the ribs widen like doors opening onto moonlit halls. Hold that cool hush. Exhale slowly, as if releasing a kite into still night air. With each cycle, imagine dust motes dancing in the lamplight. Bits of ancient, pigment, flecks of lunar regolith, Microscopic shavings of rocket engines. The universe is small enough to cradle in the curve of a single breath. Now let memory gather. See Eutychia in ancient Athens, tracing panic down the corridors of a city that praised logic yet silenced her fear beneath incense smoke. See Flavia in marble Rome, instructed to birth away her dread while senators cheered new aqueducts. Catch a glimpse of Alis kneeling in a stone abbey, learning that fear can be invited to sit by the fire, listened to, then gently escorted out, into the night. Feel Katerina's corseted lungs swell at dawn when she sneaks quills and sketchbooks into secret gardens. Hear Victorian pianists striking chords against the suffocating hush of rest-cure bedrooms. Watch Maria Adler on Freud's couch, spinning dreams into tentative understanding while outside snow softens Vienna's rooftops. Picture Helen standing barefoot on mid-century grass, fireflies rising like tiny signal rockets around her, Valium bottle clinking shut for good. Picture Ruth Delgado penciling bravery into a spiral notebook, consciousness-raising chorus humming Me Too through suburban walls. Their stories became yours, not because your life mirrors every detail, but because each whisper along the timeline offered a map. Here is how people before you named their trembling. Here is how they stitched balm from breath and ink and song. The particulars have changed. Smoke from bone combs swapped for electric coil needles, laudanum traded for SSRIs, hush of confessional booths replaced by video squares glowing across time zones. But the deep undercurrent remains. To be human is to feel pulse quicken in darkness. To heal is to find companions, ritual and story wide enough to cradle that pulse without crushing it. Let those companions gather now, taking seats in a great, imagined observatory built from the bones of every place you visited tonight. Polynesian tufuga drums soft rhythms on carved mallets while Egyptian priestesses swing censers that smell of myrrh and warm honey. A Siberian shaman unfurls a pelt painted with spiraling deer. A Celtic warrior leans spear against stone, woad swirls glowing faintly in starlight. Roman midwives lay copper incense braziers at the threshold. Medieval nuns unroll vellum sheets inked with tiny prayers. Victorian suffragists pin sashes across, corsets. Psychoanalysts set notebooks aside for the simple grace of listening. 1970s feminists push sofas into a circle and brew bitter but comforting coffee. Space-age engineers arrive in jumpsuits dusted with aluminum shavings, followed by hoodie-clad coders whose screensaver constellations match real-time satellite telemetry. At the back of the hall, a booster stage stands upright, scorch-kissed, yet ready for another flight, silent testimony to the art of falling upward. You notice no raised dais, no single officiant. Instead, conversation rises and falls like gentle surf. Pain, says Ötzi's soot-dark line, can be a guidepost, not just a wound. Belonging, reply Polynesian thigh bands, is etched in shared blood and chosen endurance. Identity, murmur sailor swallows, can be charted in ink when maps are scarce. Rest, sing lunar orbiters, is the quiet physics of coasting on momentum earned in fire. Courage, whispers every voice at once, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to meet it with story. Someone dims the observatory lights, perhaps a cosmonaut familiar with capsule night protocols, and stars bloom overhead, projected onto a domed ceiling or maybe simply conjured by imagination. They flicker softly. A griffin here, a serotonin molecule there, a tiny blooming peony beside a tiger's calm eye. Between constellations run faint lines, trembling ink breath story repeat. The pattern is both lullaby and launch sequence. Feel the notebook balanced on your knees, final page still blank. You could fill it with mistakes, scribbled calculations that never quite converge, shopping lists of unremarkable errands, worry loops that trace the same anxious orbit. Or you could let it stay empty, a small patch of uncharted sky whose silence reminds you that not every fear requires inscription, that sometimes the bravest mark is the space left clear for tomorrow's kinder hypothesis. Close the notebook. Turn off the lamp. In darkness, memory's observatory remains. A place you can revisit whenever pulse skitters and thoughts tangle. Its doors never lock. Its inhabitants never sleep. They'll talk softly among themselves, comparing herbal teas to guided meditations, grid fins to dragon wings, while you drift toward rest. You needn't solve every equation now. The moon waited 4 billion years for a footprint. Your heart can wait until sunrise for answers. On the edge of sleep, you hear one last voice. Perhaps Ruth's, perhaps Gagarin's, perhaps your own inner narrator. Say simply, "Don't be afraid. I am a friend." The phrase echoes back through every room you have travelled, from Abbey to ISS Cupola, carrying the sure knowledge that though anxiety may revisit, so will this circle of story keepers, ready to meet it with steady breath, soothing ink and stars that rise on schedule. Outside, satellites blink like distant campfires. Somewhere a reusable booster lands softly on rolling seas. Somewhere, a nurse unwraps a bandage to find her peony tiger healed, colours settled, story intact. Somewhere, a coder silences midnight notifications and steps barefoot into a backyard alive with cricket lullabies. And here, in your own room, the clock's pulse has slowed to match your own. Breath in 4, hold 2, out 6. Ancient code, proven many times tonight. Let the observatory lights dim completely. Let the long roll of history silk wrap your shoulders. Ink settles, rockets coast, the earth turns beneath dream-closed eyes. Tomorrow's streets will bustle again. Deadlines chirp, headlines ping, but the stories remain, tucked safe beneath your ribs like a handwritten map to quiet. Trust that map. Let sleep take the controls. A soft countdown begins. 10, 9, 8. Unhurried, each number a falling feather. By the time you reach one, you are already adrift, a tiny satellite on a gentle private orbit, pages turned, engines quiet, guided only by the steady gravitational pull of rest. Good night, traveller. The story watches, over you until morning.